In the shadows of time, there are stories carved into stone, buried beneath shifting sands, and whispered through crumbling ruins, stories that defy logic, challenge belief, and remain unsolved to this day. Why did entire civilizations vanish without a trace? How did ancient engineers move monolithic stones heavier than modern machinery could lift? And who were the builders behind structures aligned so precisely with the stars that even today, astronomers marvel at their accuracy? From the forgotten temples of the Amazon to mysterious underground cities in Anatolia, from ancient megaliths that predate known history to artifacts found in the hills of Palestine that seem to belong to no known culture, there exists a world of riddles that refuses to be silenced by time or explanation. These are not fairy tales or myths. These are real places, real relics, real mysteries. And for every answer we think we've found, a dozen more questions rise from the dust. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the greatest enigmas of our ancient world. Mysteries that continue to haunt the minds of historians, scientists, and seekers alike. This is Ancient Mysteries Historians Still Can't Explain. The sun hangs low over the eastern Mediterranean, casting long shadows across the weathered stones of Ugarit. The ancient city's ruins, now silent and broken, once echoed with the bustle of trade, the rhythm of cuneiform scribes, and the clash of bronze weapons. Today, only the sea breeze whispers through these streets, a ghostly reminder of a civilization that thrived for centuries, and then vanished almost overnight. Around 1200 BC, something happened. Something so vast, so devastating, that it brought the Bronze Age world to its knees. For nearly 3 centuries, mighty empires, prosperous city-states, and flourishing trade routes had formed a vast interconnected system spanning from Mycenaean Greece to Mesopotamia, from the Hittite heartlands of Anatolia to the shores of ancient Palestine and Egypt. This was a world built on shared knowledge, diplomacy, and the unmatched strength of bronze. But then, like a string of dominoes, the great cities fell. Ugarit was among the first. In one of its final letters, a desperate king pleads for help. "My father, the enemy ships are already here." But no help came. The city was destroyed, its libraries buried in ash, its people scattered or slain. Across the region, other centers of power followed. Mycenae and Pylos in Greece, Hattusa in Anatolia, Alalak, Enkomi, and countless others, all reduced to ruins. Trade stopped. Writing systems disappeared. Populations plummeted. The world of the Bronze Age ended. How did it happen? Mainstream historians point to a convergence of calamities: earthquakes, famine, political unrest, and shifting climate patterns, all plausible, all supported by varying degrees of evidence. A series of droughts, for instance, could have crippled agriculture and fueled mass migrations. In Egypt, inscriptions from the reign of Ramses III speak of northern invaders and failing harvests. Dendrochronology and ice core data suggest unusual climate activity. In such a fragile, interlinked world, even minor disruptions could have led to cascading collapse. Then there were the so-called Sea Peoples, a mysterious coalition of maritime raiders who emerged seemingly out of nowhere, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Egyptian records depict fierce battles on land and sea. Ramses III claims victory against them, yet even Egypt, the last great Bronze Age power, never fully recovered. Who were these Sea Peoples? Refugees? Mercenaries? Rebels? No one truly knows. Their names, Sherdun, Shekelesh, Peliset, are carved into stone, but their origins remain a mystery. But even these explanations leave gaps. Why did so many unrelated civilizations fall within a few decades of one another? Why did cities untouched by earthquakes or invasions also decline? Why did entire scripts, like Linear B or the cuneiform of Ugarit, vanish, never to be used again? Some scholars speculate about systemic failure. As trade networks grew more complex, so too did their fragility. A shortage of tin, essential for making bronze, could have halted weapon production and crippled economies. Political elites, disconnected from their struggling populations, may have lost legitimacy, leading to widespread revolt. Others suggest technological transitions played a role. The spread of ironworking, once rare, began to outpace bronze, reshaping warfare and economies alike. And yet, a deeper mystery lingers. What if we're looking in the wrong direction? There are fringe theories, whispered on the edge of academic circles. Some suggest a celestial event, a comet or solar flare, might have caused massive disruption. Others propose disease, perhaps a now extinct plague, swept through ports and capitals, leaving chaos in its wake. A few theorists speak of dark forces within society itself, cultic uprisings, systemic sabotage, or a deliberate reset by disenfranchised classes. Even more curious are the recurring themes in the myths that follow the collapse. In Homer's Odyssey, composed centuries later, the world is one of scattered ruins and forgotten cities. In the Hebrew Bible, stories emerge of exoduses, fallen towers, and lost kingdoms. Oral traditions from the Aegean to Mesopotamia carry echoes of a world undone, a collective memory of something cataclysmic. Archaeology continues to uncover new pieces of the puzzle. In southern Palestine, layers of ash and debris suggest multiple waves of destruction and rebuilding. In Anatolia, newly excavated sites hint at refugee settlements and changing trade patterns. Submerged ruins along the Levantine coast reveal ports lost to rising seas or tsunamis. Each fragment adds to the narrative, but none completed, and perhaps that's what draws us in. The Bronze Age collapse is not merely a story of cities falling and empires dying. It's a mirror, reflecting the fragility of complex systems, the unpredictability of nature, and the enduring resilience of human societies. It reminds us that even the most advanced civilizations, those with writing, diplomacy, engineering, and art, can vanish in a single generation. But above all, it leaves us wondering, what really happened in those dark centuries when the lights of the ancient world flickered and went out? Were the Sea Peoples truly outsiders or displaced insiders reclaiming power? Was the collapse inevitable, or could it have been averted? And what secrets still lie beneath the sands, waiting for the day when they too will speak? For now, the answers remain elusive. The ruins are silent. The scrolls have crumbled, but the mystery endures. And somewhere out there, buried beneath centuries of earth and silence, the truth may yet be waiting to be found. The waves of the eastern Mediterranean lap gently against the weathered stones of ancient coastal ruins, their rhythmic whispers carrying echoes of a forgotten war. Here, along the shores of what is now called Palestine, archaeologists have uncovered the charred remains of once thriving ports, cities reduced to ash in a storm of violence more than 3,000 years ago. It was here, between the 13th and 12th centuries BC, that an enigmatic force swept across the seas, leaving shattered empires and a trail of unanswered questions in its wake. They are known only as the Sea Peoples. The name itself is a modern invention, drawn from ancient Egyptian inscriptions that depict fierce battles fought against marauding fleets. We see them carved into the walls of Medinet Habu, where Pharaoh Ramses III boasts of his victory over these mysterious invaders. The scenes are striking. Warships colliding in turbulent seas, soldiers clad in feathered helmets and wielding strange curved swords, their origins unrecorded and their motives unknown. But who were they really? And why did they strike at the heart of the Bronze Age world? Mainstream historians suggest that the Sea Peoples were not a single group, but a confederation of displaced tribes and seafaring warriors. They may have come from regions around the Aegean, Anatolia, or even as far west as Sardinia or Sicily. Driven by famine, climate change, or social upheaval, they could have banded together in desperate search of new lands. The collapse of complex trade networks, already weakened by drought and internal strife, would have made the eastern Mediterranean particularly vulnerable. Egypt, Hatti, and the coastal cities of Palestine all bore the brunt of their relentless assaults. In letter after letter found in the ruins of Ugarit, kings cry out for aid against enemies arriving by sea. "The ships are here, the cities are burning," one ruler wrote in despair. But no help came. The Hittite Empire, once a dominant force in Anatolia, crumbled. Its capital, Hattusa, abandoned and left to the elements. Even the powerful Mycenaean palaces of Greece fell in the same era, suggesting that the Sea Peoples were not just raiders, but perhaps a symptom of a much larger, interconnected crisis. Yet the mystery deepens. Some scholars argue that the Sea Peoples were not purely outsiders, but the displaced fragments of the very civilizations they attacked. Could they have been former soldiers, merchants, or refugees, people forced to the sea by collapsing economies and failing harvests? Perhaps they were not conquerors by design, but survivors, pushing into foreign lands in search of food and stability. Egyptian records mention the Peliset, widely believed to be the ancestors of the Philistines who later settled in coastal Palestine. Were they part of this enigmatic coalition? And if so, what drove them to risk everything on the open water? The archaeological record offers tantalizing clues. Distinctive pottery styles, thought to belong to the Sea Peoples, have been found across the Levant and Cyprus, suggesting both widespread movement and cultural blending. Some sites show evidence of violent destruction, while others reveal signs of peaceful settlement. Could this mean that the Sea Peoples were as much settlers as they were invaders? Or does this duality simply reflect the chaos of the time? More speculative theories push the boundaries further. A few researchers have suggested that the Sea Peoples might have been a highly organized maritime power, perhaps even an early form of piracy on a grand scale. Others propose links to natural disasters, tsunamis, earthquakes, or volcanic eruptions that might have displaced entire coastal communities. Could the great eruption of Thera centuries earlier have set in motion a chain of migrations that culminated in these invasions? Or were there still unseen forces, economic, climatic, or even astronomical, that reshaped the political map of the ancient world? Ancient Egyptian art provides its own cryptic narrative. The depictions of naval warfare on the walls of Ramses III's temple show an enemy both fearsome and skilled, suggesting that these were not mere raiders but disciplined fighters with advanced shipbuilding techniques. Their warships, with high prows and curved sterns, hint at a maritime culture with deep experience navigating the Mediterranean. But no written language or surviving records from the Sea Peoples themselves have ever been found. We know them only through the stories of their enemies. And so, their identity remains elusive. Theories abound. Were they remnants of fallen Mycenaean kingdoms? Dispossessed Anatolians fleeing the collapse of the Hittite Empire? A confederation of displaced seafarers united by necessity? Or were they something entirely different? An alliance forged in the shadows, seizing opportunity in a time of chaos. The Sea Peoples left behind no monuments, no inscriptions, no great works of architecture. Only the scars they carved into the civilizations they encountered tell their story. Cities burned, empires fell, trade routes that had endured for centuries were severed, plunging the eastern Mediterranean into a dark age from which it would take centuries to recover. Their sudden appearance, and equally sudden disappearance remains one of history's most perplexing enigmas. As we sift through the remnants of the past, from the shattered fortresses of Canaan to the temple reliefs of Egypt, we are left with questions that seem to grow, not diminish, over time. Who commanded these fleets? What alliances or rivalries drove their campaigns? Were they the cause of the Bronze Age collapse, or merely its most visible symptom? Perhaps the answer lies buried beneath the waves, in shipwrecks that have yet to be discovered. Or perhaps it lies in the silent ruins of coastal settlements, waiting for the next careful excavation to reveal a fragment of truth. Until then, the sea peoples remain as mysterious as the tides that carried them, a shadowy force that rose from the horizon, changed the course of history, and then vanished into legend. What secrets did they take with them into the depths of time? And how much of their story still waits, hidden beneath centuries of earth and sea, to be uncovered? Beneath the harsh sun of the Punjab and Sindh plains, the earth gives way to quiet relics of a vanished world. Crumbling bricks, once part of mighty walls and bathhouses, lie scattered across the arid ground. The ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro rises like a fossilized mirage from the dust. Its straight avenues, multi-story homes, and advanced drainage systems whispering of a civilization both grand and forgotten. This was the Indus Valley Civilization, one of the world's earliest urban societies. It thrived for nearly 700 years, and then, as if swallowed by time, it disappeared. At its height, around 2600 to 1900 BC, the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization, spanned more than 1 million square kilometers, from present-day northeast Afghanistan to western India. With major cities like Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, and Lothal, it rivaled Mesopotamia and Egypt in both scale and sophistication. Its people built carefully planned cities with grid-like streets, granaries, public baths, and even what appears to be indoor plumbing. They traded with distant regions, from Central Asia to the Persian Gulf, and yet no palaces, no towering monuments, no glorified tombs. The power of the Harappans, it seems, was not built on kings, but on balance. But what happened to them? Archaeologists and historians have wrestled with this question for more than a century. Around 1900 BC, the cities began to decline. Urban centers were slowly abandoned. Trade connections with Mesopotamia faded. The distinctive script, still undeciphered, vanished. By 1300 BC, the great cities were silent, and the civilization itself had dissolved into scattered villages and fragmented cultures. Why? Mainstream theories point to environmental factors. Geological studies suggest that tectonic activity may have altered river courses, especially that of the mighty Saraswati River, which some scholars identify with the now dry Ghaggar-Hakra system. If rivers dried up or shifted, agricultural systems would have collapsed. In a land so reliant on seasonal floods for fertility, even a minor change in water availability could prove catastrophic. Others cite climate change. A gradual weakening of the monsoon between 2000 and 1700 BC may have led to long-term drought conditions. Crops would have failed. Populations would have declined or migrated. Cities once sustained by riverine abundance may have simply become uninhabitable. Yet, environmental shifts alone do not explain the silence left behind. Where are the mass graves, the signs of battle, the records of a slow decline? Mohenjo-Daro, in particular, offers a strange tableau. Bodies have been found in the streets, not buried in ritual, but seemingly struck down mid-flight. Was there violence, disease, or something else? One of the most enduring mysteries lies in the Harappan script. Found on thousands of seals, tablets, and pottery shards, this writing system has yet to be decoded. Without a bilingual reference like the Rosetta Stone, The true meaning of these inscriptions remains locked away. Could they hold records of floods, famine, or political decisions? Could they explain why a civilization of millions dissolved into silence? In the absence of textual clarity, fringe theories have emerged. Some suggest the Harappans were conquered by invading Indo-Aryan tribes, as implied in early Vedic texts that describe the fall of fortified cities. Yet, archaeological evidence for large-scale invasion is thin, and genetic studies point toward cultural integration rather than outright displacement. Still, the theory persists. Perhaps a cultural shift, not necessarily violent, replaced urban Harappan structures with new pastoral and spiritual ways of life. Others have proposed that a massive epidemic, perhaps a form of ancient cholera or plague, swept through the densely populated cities. The meticulous drainage systems, while advanced, may have become clogged or contaminated as maintenance declined, creating conditions ripe for disease. The sudden abandonment of Mohenjo-Daro has often been cited in this context, though no definitive biological evidence has confirmed it. Even more speculative voices wonder about forgotten technologies or unexplained events. In the 20th century, some researchers noted unusual radiation levels near parts of Mohenjo-Daro. This sparked fringe theories ranging from accidental technological disaster to, more imaginatively, extraterrestrial involvement. No serious academic study supports these ideas, yet the allure of the unknown continues to feed such speculation. There is also the question of social structure. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Indus cities show no obvious signs of centralized religious or political authority. Temples, palaces, or royal tombs, hallmarks of hierarchical power, are conspicuously absent. Some scholars suggest that the Indus Valley civilization was uniquely egalitarian, governed by trade guilds or local councils rather than monarchs or warlords. If true, could such a decentralized system have simply faded, slowly and peacefully, in response to changing environmental and economic conditions? In recent years, satellite imagery has revealed hundreds of smaller, previously unknown Indus settlements across India and Pakistan. These findings suggest that the collapse may not have been as sudden or total as once believed. Perhaps the great cities fell, but the people remained, adapting, migrating, and reshaping their lives in new, less centralized forms. Was it a collapse or a transformation? As we peer into the ruins, bathhouses, granaries, finely baked bricks, we are reminded not only of what was lost, but of what still remains hidden. Without deciphered texts, their voices are still mute. Without definitive evidence, their fate is still unknown, and perhaps that is the most haunting part of this mystery. The knowledge that an entire civilization, so advanced and far-reaching, could vanish not with a roar, but with a whisper. What final moments passed through these streets before they were reclaimed by dust? What knowledge, what stories, still lie buried beneath the soil of Sindh and Gujarat, waiting to be unearthed? Until we find the key, the Indus Valley civilization will remain one of the most enduring and elusive riddles of the ancient world. The desert is silent. Sand stretches endlessly in all directions, shifting and undisturbed beneath the burning Egyptian sun. Here, in the western reaches of the Sahara, beyond the fertile Nile Valley, lies a place where wind whispers through the dunes and the past clings to the dry air like a fading memory. Beneath these vast, unforgiving sands, legend claims an army once vanished, an entire force swallowed whole by the desert without a trace. This is the story of the lost army of Cambyses. The tale begins in the 6th century BC, during the reign of Cambyses II, son of Cyrus the Great and king of the mighty Persian Empire. Having already conquered Egypt in 525 BC, Cambyses sought to expand his domain further west. His target, the Oracle of Amun at the Siwa Oasis, a sacred site deep in the Libyan desert. It was a place of spiritual authority, where priests communed with divine forces and where even Alexander the Great would later seek validation of his divine heritage. Herodotus, the Greek historian writing a century later, recounts the tale with a tone of awe and skepticism. According to his account, Cambyses dispatched 50,000 men, soldiers, guides, and support staff to cross the desert and capture the Siwan priests. They set out from Thebes, heading west into the desolate lands. After reaching the oasis of Karga, the army marched onward, and then, somewhere in the vast emptiness, they disappeared. Herodotus writes that after many days of travel, a violent sandstorm struck. The sky darkened, the wind roared, and the army was buried alive. Not a single man returned. No bones, no weapons, no remnants, just silence. But is this merely legend? Or could it be rooted in truth? Mainstream historians have long debated the story's credibility. Herodotus was known to blend observation with hearsay, and no contemporary Persian records confirm the expedition. Yet the logistical logic of Cambyses attempting to control the Siwa oracle makes strategic sense. Religious centers often posed threats to imperial rule, and Persia's expansionist policies did not end with Egypt. They pressed into all corners of the known world. So, assuming the army did exist, could a force of that size truly vanish? The desert, many agree, is capable of extraordinary erasure. Its winds can shift entire landscapes within days. Sandstorms in this region can reach hurricane force, lifting and relocating dunes that stand dozens of meters high. If caught without warning, even the most disciplined troops would be at the mercy of nature. With no shelter, no water, and no direction, the desert becomes a silent executioner. But in the centuries since, countless explorers, archaeologists, and adventurers have searched for evidence. Remnants of armor, bones, tools, anything to validate the story. Yet nothing definitive has been found. Or has it? In the early 20th century, reports surfaced of Bedouins discovering ancient weapons and bleached bones in the Egyptian desert. Some claim to have seen mass graves. In the 1990s, twin brothers Angelo and Alfredo Castiglione, Italian archaeologists, announced they had uncovered remains of a possible Persian encampment, including arrowheads, bronze tools, and fragments of textiles, in a remote area near the Gilf Kebir Plateau. The site also included human remains. They believed they had found the long-lost army, but the academic community remains divided. Critics argue the artifacts could be from other periods. The desert has been a crossroads for centuries, and without inscriptions or direct evidence linking the remains to Cambyses, the mystery persists. Alternative theories, too, have emerged. Some propose that the army never reached Siwa because of internal dissent. Perhaps a mutiny or rebellion split the ranks, and the army fractured in the desert. Others suggest that Herodotus's account may have been symbolic, a metaphor for divine punishment or imperial hubris rather than literal fact. After all, ancient stories often use the language of myth to convey moral truths. Then there are those who consider the possibility that the army did make it to Siwa and was defeated there, its remains either absorbed into local culture or deliberately concealed by the oracle's defenders. The desert, in this interpretation, becomes not a natural killer but a cloak for a political mystery. Was the story of the sandstorm a convenient cover for something more complex? More speculative voices point to the desert's reputation as a liminal space, one where reality blurs with the mythic. In cultures throughout North Africa and the Middle East, deserts are places of trial and transformation, of spiritual revelation and hidden dangers. Could something deeper, more metaphysical, have occurred? Was the army lost not just physically, but historically, erased by a convergence of geography, climate, and time? Satellite imagery and LiDAR scans have become modern tools in the search, offering glimpses beneath the sand's surface. Yet even with this technology, the desert holds tightly to its secrets. The sands shift, the winds erase footprints, and the past remains entombed beneath layers of silence. And so, the lost army of Cambyses endures, not merely as a tale of military ambition or environmental catastrophe, but as a haunting symbol of how easily human endeavor can vanish without a trace. Thousands of men, each with a name, a voice, a purpose, reduced to legend. Was the army truly lost in a storm, or was Herodotus echoing a tale already old in his time? Were the sands their tomb, or is their story still waiting to be uncovered beneath the dunes? In the end, we are left with little more than fragments, an ancient narrative, scattered clues, and the vast silence of the Sahara. But perhaps that silence is not emptiness, but invitation. An invitation to search, to question, and to wonder what else lies buried just beneath the surface. Beneath the hazy skies of Sichuan province, where the Min River weaves through fertile plains and misty bamboo groves, lies a site unlike any other in ancient China. Here, in the quiet fields near the town of Guanghan, something remarkable was unearthed. A hidden world, long forgotten by history. Enormous bronze masks with exaggerated eyes, strange golden staffs, elephant tusks buried deep in the soil, and intricate jade relics that seemed to emerge from myth rather than memory. This is Sanxingdui, one of the most baffling archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, and a civilization that, until recently, no one even knew existed. The discovery came by accident. In 1929, a farmer digging a ditch struck something solid, fragments of jade and stone, meticulously crafted but out of place. Decades later, in 1986, archaeologists uncovered two mysterious pits filled with over 1,000 artifacts: bronze statues, masks with bulging eyes and sharp ears, and sacrificial objects deliberately burned and buried. Nothing about them fit the known timeline or artistic styles of the Shang dynasty, the dominant power in China at the time. These objects were older, stranger, and completely unexpected. Who created them? Mainstream historians now believe the site belonged to a previously unknown Bronze Age culture, dating back to at least 1200 BC, though some artifacts may be even older. The people of Sanxingdui had advanced metallurgy, complex religious beliefs, and artistic expression unlike anything found elsewhere in ancient China. Their bronze work, particularly the towering human figures and surreal masks, displayed techniques that would not be seen again for centuries. And yet, this culture vanished. By around 1000 BC, the Sanxingdui site was abruptly abandoned. No written records, no gradual transition, no evidence of war or natural disaster. Just silence. The ruins lay hidden beneath centuries of earth, their people and beliefs unmentioned in Chinese historical texts. If not for that farmer's shovel, their entire existence might have remained buried forever. So, who were the Sanxingdui? And why did they disappear? The mainstream view links them to the ancient Shu Kingdom, a semi-legendary polity mentioned in Chinese chronicles. But these records are sparse, and the connection remains tenuous. The artistic style of Sanxingdui is radically different from contemporary Shang sites, more abstract, more theatrical, more surreal. While Shang bronzes are grounded in realism and ritual function, the Sanxingdui creations appear almost dreamlike, their exaggerated features suggesting a worldview foreign to familiar Chinese traditions. The discovery of more pits in 2021, 6 additional sacrificial sites containing gold masks, silk remnants, ivory carvings, and more bronze statues, deepened the mystery. Some figures stood over 2 meters tall, eyes projecting outward like telescopes. Were they representations of gods, shamans, astronomers, or something else entirely? Speculation inevitably follows. Some archaeologists propose that the Sanxingdui Civilization was part of a much broader network of ancient Asian cultures that flourished independently of the Shang dynasty. Others suggest that their sudden disappearance may have been caused by environmental catastrophe, perhaps a massive earthquake that redirected the Min River, cutting off water and forcing the people to migrate eastward to what would later become Jinsha, another enigmatic site with stylistic similarities. And then there are more unconventional theories. Could the people of Sanxingdui have been cultural outsiders, migrants from Central Asia or even beyond, who introduced new religious systems and artistic styles into the Chinese heartland before fading into obscurity? Their facial features, especially the deep-set eyes and aquiline noses seen in some of the bronze heads, are sometimes cited as evidence of a non-local origin. But these features may be symbolic rather than realistic, part of a spiritual or shamanic tradition lost to time. Fringe interpretations go further, pointing to the sheer oddity of the artifacts. The wide eyes, the masks with animalistic traits, the impossibly delicate bronze trees crowned with birds and serpents. Could these be depictions of visions, otherworldly encounters, or celestial beings? Some have speculated, without evidence, about extraterrestrial influence, while others frame the Sanxingdui people as a highly spiritual society whose rituals and mythologies were deeply intertwined with the natural and cosmic world. Still, without decipherable texts or a direct link to other ancient scripts, these questions remain frustratingly open. And what of the deliberate destruction of the artifacts? Many of the bronze pieces were intentionally broken, burned, and then buried. Was this part of a ritual, a mass offering, or a symbolic closing of an era? Were the people forced to flee and destroy their sacred objects to keep them from enemy hands? Or was this a ceremonial act marking the end of a civilization by its own will? The soil at Sanxingdui continues to yield secrets. And yet, the more we uncover, the more elusive the truth becomes. What society could produce such beauty, such mastery, and then vanish without leaving even a whisper in the annals of history? Today, visitors walk through the modern museum at Sanxingdui, gazing through glass at bronze faces with hollow eyes, expressions frozen in time. They wonder, as we all do, who looked through these masks? What gods or spirits did they serve? What stories were never written down? And what else lies buried, waiting? The Sanxingdui Civilization challenges our assumptions about ancient China and about the limits of historical memory itself. It reminds us that history is not a straight line, and that beneath every known dynasty, every familiar narrative, there may be something far older, stranger, and more enigmatic, still waiting to be understood. In the golden light of a fading Egyptian sun, the great Sphinx of Giza casts its eternal gaze toward the east. Half lion, half human, carved from a single mass of limestone, it sits as a sentinel on the edge of the Giza Plateau, ancient, weathered, and solemn. Time has worn its face and eroded its body, but its mystery remains intact. Just behind it, the pyramids loom, silent testaments to an age we still struggle to fully comprehend. But of all the enigmas in this sacred landscape, few have stirred as much quiet controversy as the curious erosion patterns on the Sphinx itself. Patterns that, some argue, whisper of rain in a desert that hasn't seen such storms in thousands of years. The mainstream view holds that the Sphinx was commissioned by Pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BC. It was carved during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom, alongside the pyramids, and served as a guardian figure, part of the funerary complex, symbolic of royal power and divine protection. For generations, this has been the accepted narrative, woven into textbooks and tours alike. But something doesn't quite add up. In the 1990s, a new voice entered the debate. Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University, stood before the monument not as an archaeologist or Egyptologist, but as a scientist trained in the study of rock and time. What he saw was unexpected. The Sphinx's enclosure, the trench-like space surrounding its base, showed signs of deep, rounded erosion, vertical channels carved not by wind-blown sand, but by water, by rain. Wind erosion typically produces sharp, angular patterns. Sand blasting over millennia sculpts faceted surfaces, not the smooth, undulating contours found along the Sphinx's flanks. Schoch proposed a radical idea. What if the erosion was the result of sustained rainfall, the kind that hasn't graced the Giza Plateau since the end of the last ice age, around 7000 BC or earlier? If true, it would mean the Sphinx predates the pyramids by several thousand years. That its origins lie not in Egypt's well-documented dynastic era, but in a shadowy, prehistoric time, long before writing, long before temples, long before pharaohs. Unsurprisingly, this theory ignited debate. Traditional Egyptologists argue that there is no cultural context for such an early construction. No tools, no settlements, no inscriptions exist from that period to support the existence of a civilization capable of carving a monument of such scale. They point instead to known practices during Khafre's reign, architectural alignment with his pyramid, and similarities to other sculptures from the same period. But proponents of the water erosion hypothesis remain undeterred. They note that geological evidence should not be dismissed simply because it conflicts with historical expectations. The rock, they argue, speaks a language older than scrolls, and what it says is troubling. Could the Sphinx be a legacy structure? Something inherited and recarved by later dynasties? Its face is notably small compared to the body, a proportion some suggest hints at a later reworking, possibly transforming an older lion-headed statue into the visage of a specific ruler. If so, what did the original Sphinx look like? And who built it? Further complicating matters is the presence of ancient repair work. Sections of the body were patched with stone in antiquity, suggesting that even in dynastic times, the monument was already considered old. Could the Egyptians themselves have inherited a sacred artifact from a forgotten past? More speculative theories have emerged from this gap in understanding. Some propose that the Sphinx was built by a pre-dynastic civilization now lost to time, one capable of advanced engineering whose memory faded before hieroglyphs began recording history. Others connect the monument to astronomical alignments, noting that the Sphinx, facing east, would have greeted the rising sun on the spring equinox, a symbol of rebirth and cosmic order. A few have ventured even further, linking the Sphinx to the constellation Leo, and suggesting it may have been designed to mark the age of Leo, roughly 10,500 BC. This idea, while appealing in its symmetry, relies heavily on symbolic interpretation and remains far from proven. Still, it provokes a tantalizing thought. Could the Sphinx be not merely a monument, but a message? A marker placed by an earlier civilization meant to endure? Of course, without definitive inscriptions or datable materials embedded within the original structure, the mystery persists. The Sphinx guards its secrets well. Today, visitors from around the world stand in the shadow of this immense figure, photographing its eroded features, tracing the outlines of its paws, and peering into eyes that have stared through millennia. Few realize they may be standing before a monument whose origins challenge the very foundation of what we believe about ancient Egypt. And so we are left with questions that science and history have yet to reconcile. Was the Great Sphinx of Giza truly built during the reign of Khafre? Or does the stone bear witness to an era far older, one erased by time, remembered only in whispers of water and weathered stone? Does the erosion speak of forgotten reigns or forgotten peoples? And if the Sphinx is older than we think, what else might lie buried beneath the sands, waiting for us to ask the right questions? The desert, as always, remains silent. But the stone remembers. In the stillness of the Ural Mountains, where pine forests stand tall and lakes lie cold and undisturbed, the earth holds memories older than civilization. Here, in a peat bog near the Shigir region of present-day Russia, something extraordinary was pulled from the ground in 1890. An object so old, so haunting in form, that it would confound generations of researchers. A towering wooden statue, carved with strange geometric patterns and humanoid faces, preserved for over 12,000 years beneath layers of organic decay. This is the Shigir Idol, the oldest known wooden sculpture in the world, and one of its most profound enigmas. Standing over 5 meters tall in its original form, the idol was carved from larch using stone tools, long before metalworking or writing were developed. Its surface is covered in intricate, almost hypnotic markings, zigzags, chevrons, and mysterious symbols whose meanings remain unknown. Along its length are carefully etched faces, some serene, some abstract, gazing from an era that predates even the great stone temples of Mesopotamia and Egypt. According to radiocarbon dating, it was crafted around 9600 BC, shortly after the last ice age ended. This places it deep within the Mesolithic period, when humans were presumed to be little more than wandering hunter-gatherers. So what was this idol doing here, so advanced, so deliberate? Mainstream archaeology has traditionally associated artistic and symbolic expression with the rise of agriculture and settled life. Yet the Shigir Idol shatters that timeline. It predates the construction of the first pyramids by over 7,000 years. It is older than Göbekli Tepe, often cited as the world's earliest temple. And it was made of wood, a material fragile, prone to decay, and rarely preserved for millennia. That it survived at all is a small miracle, made possible only by the unique anaerobic conditions of the bog where it lay buried. But perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in its age or preservation, but in its purpose. Was it religious? A totem? A map? A record? Some scholars believe the idol represents a pantheon of spirits or gods, ancestral beings revered by the people who carved it. The faces might represent entities from a spiritual world or shamanic visions experienced during ritual. Others suggest the carvings may encode a form of proto-writing, a symbolic language whose grammar and syntax are lost to time. Dr. Svetlana Savchenko, one of the lead researchers at the Sverdlovsk Regional Museum, describes the idol as a window into the metaphysical world of a culture that left behind no cities, no texts, no monumental ruins. Only this towering form, silent and unyielding. The complexity of its design suggests a society more cognitively sophisticated than previously thought for its time. This wasn't idle decoration. This was communication. But what was it trying to say? Fringe theories, as expected, have emerged. Some have speculated that the idol is evidence of a forgotten high civilization, one that flourished during the late Pleistocene before being wiped out by cataclysm. The resemblance of its patterns to symbols found in other prehistoric sites across Eurasia fuels ideas of a once unified symbolic system, a global prehistoric culture whose memory is preserved only in scattered relics. Others go further, interpreting the idol through the lens of lost knowledge, claiming it may contain encoded astronomical or cosmological data, perhaps even a map of the heavens known to ancient sky watchers. Yet these ideas remain speculative, intriguing, but unverified. Still, the idol's very existence challenges conventional models. It forces us to reevaluate what we know about early humans in Siberia and their intellectual world. This was a time when woolly mammoths still roamed, when much of northern Europe was covered in glaciers, and when life was, by all accounts, precarious and short. How then, in such conditions, could people produce something so elaborate, so conceptually rich? Could the Shigir Idol be a product not just of survival, but of wonder? There's something undeniably haunting about its form, the elongated body, the repetition of faces, stacked one above the other, perhaps signifying generations, realms, or a cosmic order. The patterns are not random. They follow rhythm, symmetry, and purpose. This was not a mere decoration or toy. It was meant to endure, to signify, to speak. And yet it doesn't. Or at least not in a language we can still understand. Recent analysis using high-resolution imaging and 3D reconstruction has revealed that the idol once stood proudly in an upright position, likely displayed in a ceremonial context. But whether it was revered by a small group, a tribe, or something more structured is unclear. No settlements or burial grounds associated with the artifact have yet been found. It stands alone, a voice from the deep past with no chorus to support it. As we gaze upon it today, housed carefully in a museum in Yekaterinburg, we are left with more questions than answers. Why would a nomadic people invest so much time, effort, and artistry into a monument that served no apparent utilitarian purpose? What compelled them to carve these specific shapes, these faces, these strange linear codes? Was it devotion, memory, a message left for us, or for themselves? And perhaps most curiously, what other artifacts, buried beneath peat, ice, or earth, remain undiscovered, equally ancient, equally mysterious? The Shigir Idol reminds us that the line between history and prehistory may be thinner than we imagine. That what we think we know about the dawn of human culture may only be a fragment of a much deeper, far older story. In the silence of the bog, beneath centuries of moss and water, the wood endured. And with it, a voice from the world before history, still waiting to be heard. In the vast stillness of the Sinai Peninsula, where jagged mountains rise from sand and wind stirs the silence of an ancient land, the sun casts long shadows across desolate plains. This is a place of raw beauty and quiet austerity, an arid corridor between empires, etched with the footsteps of countless generations. Among the myths and memories that swirl across this rugged landscape, one story endures like no other. A tale of bondage and escape, of divine wrath and wandering tribes. This is the Exodus, a defining narrative in religious tradition, and one of the most perplexing historical mysteries of the ancient world. The Book of Exodus describes it with vivid drama. A nation enslaved in Egypt, rescued through miracles, led by a prophet named Moses, and guided through desert wilderness toward a promised land. Waters parted. Plagues fell upon cities. A mountain blazed with divine fire. And yet, for all its narrative power, the historical record remains strangely quiet. Was there truly a mass migration of Hebrews from Egypt? If so, when? And where is the evidence? Mainstream Egyptologists argue that the lack of direct textual or archaeological confirmation casts doubt on the literal interpretation of the Exodus story. Ancient Egypt kept meticulous records. Monumental inscriptions, royal decrees, and temple carvings chronicled even minor events. Nowhere, they say, do these sources mention plagues, a slave uprising, or the sudden loss of an entire labor force. The great cities of Ramses and Pithom, traditionally linked to the Hebrew slaves, appear fully intact throughout the supposed period of the Exodus. And yet, there are patterns in the sand, small anomalies, half-formed clues that resist simple dismissal. The story of Semitic-speaking peoples living in Egypt is, in fact, well supported. The Hyksos, foreign rulers of part of Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, were of Semitic origin. They ruled the Nile Delta for over a century before being expelled around 1550 BC. Could this be a distant cultural memory, reshaped into the Exodus narrative? Or was there a later migration, perhaps during times of famine or instability, such as the reign of Ramses II, or the chaos following the Bronze Age collapse? Some archaeologists propose that the Exodus, if historical, was not a single dramatic event but a long and complex process, an exodus not of one people, but of many. Migrant groups, disaffected laborers, and refugees may have moved between Egypt and Canaan over generations. Their experiences, preserved orally, may have coalesced into a single, powerful tradition. Still, others seek harder clues. In the 1980s, archaeologist Emmanuel Anati identified a mountain in northwest Saudi Arabia, Jebel al-Lawz, as a possible Mount Sinai, proposing that it matched several biblical descriptions more closely than the traditional Sinai location. Satellite imagery revealed trails, camp-like formations, and stone enclosures. Could these be traces of the wandering tribes? Others look to natural explanations for the biblical miracles. The parting of the Red Sea, for example, has been linked by some scientists to a rare weather phenomenon, wind set down, where sustained, strong winds could push water aside in shallow lakes or coastal lagoons. The pillar of fire that led the people by night, possibly a memory of volcanic activity or meteorological lights over the desert. And then there are the plagues. Volcanologists and historians have speculated that the 10 plagues might echo real natural disasters. The eruption of the Thera volcano on Santorini, dated to around 1600 BC, sent ash and toxic gases across the eastern Mediterranean. Could the contaminated waters, diseased livestock, and sky-darkening storms described in Exodus reflect distant consequences of this cataclysm? Even more intriguing is the Ipuwer Papyrus, a controversial Egyptian text held in Leiden, which describes a period of social chaos, the river turning to blood, servants fleeing their masters, fire consuming cities. Though its dating and interpretation remain debated, the parallels are difficult to ignore. Still, nothing is conclusive. No definitive encampments have been found in the Sinai large enough to support a migration of thousands. No tablets bearing the name of Moses. No smoking gun. And yet, the mystery persists. Because the Exodus is not merely a historical puzzle, it is a cultural cornerstone. Its story shaped the identity of an entire people, echoed in traditions stretching from the Nile to the highlands of Palestine. And if it did not happen exactly as written, then what kernel of truth lies beneath the narrative? Did a charismatic leader lead a band of outcasts through desert terrain, inspired by visions or memory? Did ancient Egyptian slaves once look toward the desert as a land of freedom? Or does the Exodus encode something deeper, symbolic truth forged in suffering and resilience? Speculative theories abound. Some suggest the Ark of the Covenant was more than symbolic, a device of lost technology. Others imagine the Exodus as part of a broader collapse of late Bronze Age civilizations, with populations on the move and old orders crumbling. A few more fringe perspectives propose celestial events, comets, magnetic disruptions, or even contact with intelligences beyond understanding, as catalysts for the extraordinary phenomena described. But these are shadows. The sand reveals little. As the camera pans across the desolate plains of the Sinai or the green hills of Palestine, we are reminded that the line between myth and memory is often porous, that stories endure not only because they are true, but because they are necessary. The Exodus remains unproven, and yet it refuses to be forgotten. Was it real? Was it allegory? Or was it something in between? a blend of history, hope, and the long echoes of voices that once moved through the wilderness. What else lies buried in the silence between scripture and stone? Only time, and perhaps the desert, will tell. Beneath the turquoise waters off the southern coast of Japan, where the East China Sea meets the Philippine Sea in a restless dance, lies something that has puzzled divers and scholars for decades. Just off the shore of Yonaguni, the westernmost of Japan's inhabited islands, sunlight filters down through crystal depths to illuminate an eerie underwater landscape. Massive stone platforms, broad terraces, sharp right angles, and stair-like steps carved into the bedrock itself. It is silent, still, and strangely geometric. This is the Yonaguni Monument, often called Japan's Atlantis, and one of the most hotly debated archaeological mysteries beneath the waves. Discovered in 1986 by local diver Kihachiro Aratake, the structure immediately defied expectations. It appeared, at first glance, like an ancient stepped pyramid submerged in the sea. At approximately 150 meters long and 40 meters wide, with platforms as high as 25 meters, its form seemed too regular, too intentional, to be a product of chance. Since then, it has drawn researchers, skeptics, and dreamers from around the world, each seeking to uncover the truth behind its silent stones. Mainstream geologists argue that the Yonaguni Formation is natural. They point to the region's composition, primarily sandstone, known to fracture cleanly under tectonic pressure, erosion, and seismic activity. The island lies in a zone of frequent earthquakes, and over millennia, the forces of nature may have sculpted the seafloor into a series of flat surfaces and angular breaks that only appear artificial to the untrained eye. But others are not so sure. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus has studied the site for decades. He believes the structure shows evidence of human modification: walls, roads, what may be a large central staircase, and even what he identifies as the remnants of carvings and stone pillars. According to Kimura, some of these features are not aligned with the natural fault lines of the rock and appear to have been shaped or arranged by deliberate hands. He suggests that Yonaguni may be the remains of an ancient city, submerged thousands of years ago when sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age. If true, that would place the structure's creation before 10,000 BC, making it older than any known civilization on Earth. But who could have built it? And why? No known culture in the region is believed to have had the capability or need to create such massive stone structures at such an early date. The oldest confirmed settlements in the Japanese archipelago date to the Jomon period, beginning around 14,000 BC. But those early communities left behind pottery, not megaliths. No tools or artifacts have been recovered directly from the Yonaguni site to definitively link it to a known society. Its mystery lies not just in its form, but in its isolation from everything else we think we understand about early human development. Some researchers propose that Yonaguni may be a ritual or ceremonial structure. Others believe it could have served as a port or harbor, built by a maritime culture lost to rising seas. And then there are those who link it to global flood myths, echoes of a cataclysmic deluge that may have submerged coastal civilizations at the end of the Pleistocene. Speculative theories abound. Some suggest Yonaguni could be the remnant of the legendary lost continent of Mu, a hypothetical Pacific civilization once proposed in the 19th century as a counterpart to Atlantis. Others draw comparisons to submerged ruins off the coasts of India, Malta, and the Caribbean, imagining a global network of seafaring peoples whose monuments now rest beneath the waves. And yet, hard evidence remains elusive. Underwater excavation is notoriously difficult. Currents are strong in this region, visibility can be poor, and the sheer scale of the monument complicates efforts to map or analyze it in full detail. Further, The absence of inscriptions, tools, or organic material has prevented radiocarbon dating or cultural attribution. Even if humans once shaped Yonaguni, proving it with certainty is no simple task. Still, the questions persist. Why would nature produce a structure with such sharp, clean lines, right angles and vertical faces that appear so architectural? Why do some surfaces bear what look like carvings or symbols, now weathered and worn? Could a lost society, coastal and sophisticated, have once flourished here before the seas claimed their legacy? And what of the broader implications? If Yonaguni is indeed man-made, or even partially modified, it would force a reevaluation of early human capabilities. It would suggest that advanced architecture, urban planning, and seafaring may have emerged far earlier than previously believed, perhaps even before the dawn of recorded history. It would challenge the traditional narrative of slow, gradual progress and invite a deeper look into humanity's forgotten past. Yet caution remains essential. The line between pattern recognition and confirmation bias is thin. The human brain is wired to see order, to impose meaning on randomness. A few straight lines can evoke temples. A pile of stones can suggest cities. Without context, even the grandest structures may be misread. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of Yonaguni is what it represents, a reminder of how much lies beneath the surface, literally and metaphorically. That beneath our maps and models, beneath the narratives we build from pottery shards and ancient texts, there may still be stories we've yet to uncover. Stories written in stone, washed by tides, and waiting for someone to ask the right question. What then is Yonaguni? A geological oddity, a sunken monument to an age lost in the fog of time, or something altogether different, something we have yet to imagine. The waves roll on. The stone remains silent. But the mystery, it endures. In the lowland jungles of southern Mexico, where dense forests cling to ancient mounds and the air is thick with humidity and silence, great stone faces emerge from the earth. They stare forward with timeless expressions, neither stern nor serene, but something in between. These are the colossal heads of the Olmec Civilization, carved from basalt and weighing many tons. They are scattered across Veracruz and Tabasco like sentinels of a forgotten age, bearing silent witness to a culture that rose and then vanished, with little explanation. This is the mystery of the Olmec Collapse. Often called the mother civilization of Mesoamerica, the Olmecs flourished between roughly 1500 and 400 BC. Long before the Maya built towering pyramids or the Aztecs established imperial cities, the Olmecs were laying the foundations of Mesoamerican culture. They built ceremonial centers, developed writing and calendar systems, and engaged in long-distance trade stretching as far as present-day Guatemala and the Valley of Mexico. Their influence is seen in everything from jaguar iconography to ball game courts and ritual bloodletting practices that would echo through later civilizations. Their cities, San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes, were once vibrant centers of ritual and power. Massive earthen platforms rose from the jungle floor, accompanied by finely crafted jade masks, intricate figurines, and monumental sculptures. The Olmec seemed to possess a level of cultural and technological sophistication unmatched in the region at the time. But by around 400 BC, the ceremonial centers were abandoned. The monuments were buried or defaced. The jungle reclaimed the land, and the people disappeared from history. What happened? Mainstream archaeology points to a series of possible interwoven causes. Environmental change is one of the most cited. Shifting river courses may have undermined agriculture in the flood-prone regions where the Olmec built their cities. Deforestation, driven by urban expansion and the demand for construction materials, could have led to soil erosion and reduced crop yields. A changing climate, perhaps a period of extended drought, may have stressed populations already dependent on delicate ecological balances. There is also the question of internal unrest. The Olmec elite, closely tied to religious and ceremonial power, may have lost legitimacy during times of environmental stress. Revolts from within or conflicts between rival centers could have fractured a once cohesive cultural sphere. San Lorenzo, the earliest major center, was abandoned around 900 BC. Its successor, La Venta, flourished for several centuries but was also eventually left behind. And yet, for all the plausibility of these explanations, a sense of mystery lingers. Why are so many Olmec monuments deliberately defaced? At La Venta, colossal heads and altars appear intentionally buried or broken, ritually terminated, as some scholars have suggested. Was this an act of ritual closure, a deliberate ending by the Olmec themselves, or evidence of conquest, perhaps by a rival group that sought to erase their memory? Some researchers have speculated about invasion. Could an external force have played a role in the Olmec downfall? The archaeological record offers limited evidence of warfare on a large scale, but that absence may reflect more about our lack of data than what truly happened. The transition from Olmec to post-Olmec cultures was not neat. It was fragmented, regional, and still poorly understood. Others propose a more symbolic view. The Olmecs may not have collapsed at all, but gradually transformed, absorbed into emerging regional cultures like the Epi-Olmec or early Maya. Their legacy, in this interpretation, did not vanish but flowed into new forms. The art, mythology, and religious structures we attribute to later Mesoamerican civilizations may well carry the DNA of Olmec thought. And then, there are the more speculative voices. Some note the striking complexity of Olmec monuments, their alignment with celestial bodies, their artistic realism, and their use of massive basalt transported from distant quarries without the use of the wheel or pack animals. How did they manage such feats? Could they have possessed knowledge or techniques now lost to history? The colossal heads themselves raise questions. Who do they represent? Their helmets, often mistaken for ball game gear, may be ceremonial. But their features, broad noses, full lips, distinctive facial expressions, have sparked fringe theories suggesting contact with African or even transoceanic peoples. Mainstream scholars reject these claims, pointing to Mesoamerican ancestry and regional artistic styles. Still, the debate underscores how little we truly know about the Olmec worldview. Their writing system, one of the earliest in the Americas, remains undeciphered. A few inscribed stelae and symbols suggest an emerging glyphic language, but too little has survived to form a full picture. If more texts are ever uncovered, they could illuminate the spiritual, political, or environmental factors behind the Olmec transition. Until then, we are left with fragments and guesses. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Olmec mystery is the absence of burial sites for elites. Where were their rulers laid to rest? Were their remains deliberately hidden, destroyed, or have they simply not yet been found? In a civilization that invested so much in ritual and monumentality, the silence surrounding their dead is deafening. Today, the colossal heads still rest in museum gardens and cleared plazas, their eyes fixed on horizons long past. They seem to ask us the same questions we ask of them. Who were you? Why did you leave? And what did you know that we have forgotten? The jungle has kept its secrets well, but the clues remain, buried beneath soil and stone, waiting for the next spade, the next insight, the next question. The Olmec Collapse was not an explosion, but a slow fading. A culture that once lit the dawn of Mesoamerica, gradually stepping back into shadow. Did they fall? or simply walk away? And if so, where did they go? In the parched coastal plains of southern Peru, where the Andes begin their slow descent toward the Pacific, an eerie quiet pervades the landscape. Wind moves over stone and dust, yet the silence seems almost reverent, as though the earth itself were holding its breath. From ground level, the land appears barren, unremarkable. But from above, a very different picture emerges. Etched into the desert floor are vast geometric patterns, spirals, trapezoids, straight lines stretching for kilometers, and gigantic geoglyphs: a hummingbird, a monkey, a spider, a condor. So vast they can only be fully seen from the sky. These are the Nazca Lines, an ancient canvas still shrouded in mystery. First brought to international attention in the 1920s when pilots flying over the region reported strange shapes carved into the earth. The Nazca Lines have since become one of the most enduring enigmas of the ancient world. Believed to have been created between 500 BC and 500 AD by the Nazca culture, the lines were made by removing the dark, oxidized stones on the desert surface to reveal the lighter soil beneath. The dry, windless climate of the region has preserved them for centuries. More than 800 straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and over 70 biomorphic designs have been documented, some over 1,000 feet long. They are remarkable in their precision and scale, drawn across hills, valleys, and open plains, with a kind of planning that suggests both cultural and perhaps cosmological significance. But what were they for? Theories abound. Mainstream archaeologists have suggested that the lines served ritual purposes, paths walked during ceremonial processions to honor deities linked to water, fertility, and agriculture. In a land where rainfall is rare and unpredictable, the need to appeal to nature's forces would have been vital. Some researchers believe the trapezoidal shapes and straight paths may have been offerings themselves, lines meant not to be seen from the sky, but to be walked, inscribed into the desert as acts of devotion. Others have looked to the stars. Maria Reiche, a German mathematician and archaeologist who dedicated her life to studying the lines, proposed that they had astronomical functions. She believed that some of the lines aligned with solstices and planetary risings, forming a kind of ancient observatory or calendar. While many of her alignments have since been challenged or refined, the notion that the Nazca Lines may connect earth and sky still lingers in scholarly circles. But how could a pre-Inca society, without flight or satellite imaging, have created such immense and precise figures? Some scholars point to simple tools: ropes, stakes, and careful planning. Experimental archaeologists have successfully recreated some of the smaller geoglyphs using only these methods, demonstrating that a coordinated group with basic technology could achieve large-scale designs. Still, this does not explain why so much effort was expended in such a harsh and desolate environment. A few geoglyphs are especially puzzling. One figure, dubbed the astronaut, appears to depict a humanoid with large eyes and an oversized head, arm raised in greeting or warning. Another, less a figure than a symbol, resembles a spiral or vortex, a motif echoed in other ancient traditions worldwide. Are these symbolic representations of mythology? Stylized depictions of shamans in trance? Or could they be something else entirely? Some researchers have noted that certain figures, such as the monkey and hummingbird, are not native to the immediate region. Their inclusion might reflect trade networks or spiritual beliefs reaching deep into the Amazon basin or beyond. Could the lines have served as messages or spiritual maps, connecting distant cultural centers across ancient South America? Then there are the more speculative interpretations. Erich von Däniken, author of Chariots of the Gods, famously suggested that the Nazca Lines were ancient runways intended for extraterrestrial spacecraft. an idea largely dismissed by archaeologists but still prominent in popular media. Others believe the lines encode forgotten knowledge, celestial navigation, ley lines, or lost histories passed down from an advanced prehistoric civilization. Still, these fringe theories, while often lacking evidence, reflect a broader truth: that the Nazca lines resist simple explanation. They occupy a space where religion, environment, astronomy, and art converge, and where meaning is layered, elusive, and possibly multivalent. Recent discoveries have only deepened the mystery. With the aid of drones and high-resolution imaging, researchers have identified dozens of previously unknown geoglyphs, many smaller, etched into hillsides, or eroded nearly to invisibility. Some depict warriors, others abstract forms not yet classified. The more we uncover, the more complex the Nazca cultural landscape appears. And yet, the people themselves are gone. The Nazca civilization faded around 600 AD, possibly due to a combination of climate change, deforestation, and social unrest. Their language, their oral traditions, and their priests, all lost. Only their lines remain. A message, perhaps, from the earth to the sky, or from the past to the future. Today, we stand above these silent glyphs in airplanes or view them on satellite images, decoding and debating their purpose from a distance. But one cannot help but wonder, what would they mean to those who made them? Were they offerings, warnings, celebrations? Did they walk these lines in hope, in fear, or in awe? The desert holds no answers, only shadows and shapes waiting. What drove the Nazca to carve symbols so vast no human eye could fully behold them from the ground? And what truths still lie etched into the ancient sands, faint, fading, and waiting to be found? In the quiet hills of Zhejiang Province, eastern China, where green rice fields meet forested slopes and the air hangs heavy with mist, lies a marvel hidden beneath the earth. On the surface, the village of Xianbeikun appears ordinary, peaceful, unassuming, but beneath its foundations, a forgotten world stretches in all directions. A world of silent chambers, soaring pillars, and chiseled stone, submerged in shadow and time. These are the Longyou Caves, an underground complex so vast, so precise, and so inexplicably absent from history that their very existence challenges what we think we know about ancient engineering. The discovery, like many great mysteries, began by accident. In 1992, a curious villager named Wu Anai decided to drain what he believed to be a deep, man-made pond, one of several dotting the landscape. When the water was pumped away, it revealed something astonishing: a cavernous space beneath, hand-carved from solid sandstone. As more of the surrounding ponds were drained, more caves emerged. To date, 24 such chambers have been uncovered, each enormous in scale, meticulously crafted, and yet entirely unrecorded in historical texts. Each cave reaches heights of up to 30 meters, with walls adorned in parallel chisel marks running uniformly from ceiling to floor. Stone columns rise to support massive ceilings, and the overall layout suggests deliberate design, not haphazard quarrying. Together, the caves cover over 30,000 square meters. But who built them? And why? Mainstream theories suggest the caves may have served as quarries, excavated for building material and later abandoned. But this explanation raises more questions than it answers. Why would quarry workers take such care to leave behind perfectly symmetrical halls, staircases, and decorative patterns? Why preserve columns and smooth surfaces when quarrying is typically destructive and utilitarian? Moreover, the sheer scale of the effort is staggering. Estimates suggest that millions of cubic feet of stone were removed, without leaving any trace of where the material went. No debris fields, no known structures made from the extracted rock. The amount of labor required would have involved thousands of workers over many years. And yet, there is no mention of such a monumental undertaking in the extensive Chinese historical record. Not in imperial archives, not in local chronicles, not even in legend. The mystery deepens. There are no soot marks on the ceilings or walls, no sign of fire used for lighting during excavation. How did ancient workers, if indeed they were ancient, illuminate these vast subterranean spaces? Oil lamps? Reflective surfaces? Or some method now forgotten? Further, despite the cave's age, believed to be over 2,000 years old, perhaps dating to the late Warring States period or early Qin dynasty, they show little sign of collapse or erosion. The structural integrity of the halls and columns has endured remarkably well, suggesting a level of engineering foresight and precision rare even in known ancient megastructures. Some archaeologists propose that the caves were ceremonial or ritual spaces, constructed for spiritual purposes rather than practical ones. The consistent motif of the chisel marks, aligned as if by design rather than function, might support this view. Could they represent a symbolic texture meant to reflect light or channel acoustics? Or were they simply the byproduct of an unknown excavation technique? Then there are the more speculative theories. Some have drawn parallels between the Longyou Caves and other mysterious underground structures around the world, such as Derinkuyu in Turkey or the Hypogeum in Malta. Is it possible that subterranean architecture was more widespread in antiquity than we assume? Could these caves have served as refuges, storage vaults, or even observatories, designed to protect their inhabitants or treasures from external threats? Others, stepping further into the fringe, speculate on lost civilizations with advanced knowledge, pointing to the absence of historical record as a sign that the caves predate known dynasties altogether. In this view, Longyou becomes a relic of an earlier epoch, erased by time, flood, or conquest. A cultural reset. Some even suggest a cataclysmic event buried the knowledge of these caves, leaving behind only their stone skeletons for later generations to puzzle over. The lack of tools, inscriptions, or artifacts within the caves only adds to the sense of deliberate abandonment, sealed off without ceremony, as if their purpose had passed. To date, no definitive answer has emerged. Excavations and studies continue, but the caves resist easy classification. Their scale, silence, and anonymity defy historical patterns. Unlike the tombs of emperors, they are not funerary. Unlike mines, they were not stripped bare. Unlike temples, they hold no altars. They are spaces without purpose, at least none we can yet discern. And perhaps that is what makes them so haunting. In a land rich with recorded history of dynasties, philosophers, engineers, and scribes, how could such an ambitious endeavor go entirely unmentioned? What does it mean when the stones speak louder than the scrolls? As the light fades within the caves, shadows fall across walls chiseled with care and precision. The echo of footsteps fades into stillness. And somewhere, in the silence of these stone halls, a story remains untold. Who carved the Longyou Caves? What knowledge guided their hands? And what else lies hidden beneath our feet, waiting to be unearthed, not just by tools, but by understanding? In the darkness of the unknown, the questions endure. In the low, sun-baked plains of southern Mesopotamia, between the winding banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, lie the quiet ruins of a civilization long forgotten by time. Before the rise of Sumer, before the invention of writing, before ziggurats pierced the sky, there was Ubaid, a culture buried deep beneath millennia of silt and silence. It is here, in the ancient settlements of Eridu and Al-Ubaid, that archaeologists unearthed something curious, something strangely out of place. Small terracotta figurines, exquisitely crafted, eerily lifelike, and unsettling in their expression. But these were not depictions of gods, kings, or animals. These figures bore elongated skulls, narrow eyes, and slender bodies with reptilian features, cold-blooded, stylized, and unlike anything else from their time. These are the Ubaid lizard figurines. Dated to around 5000 to 4000 BC, the Ubaid period predates the better-known dynasties of Mesopotamia by more than 1,000 years. It was an era of emerging complexity, of irrigation canals, communal temples, and modest villages that laid the groundwork for civilization itself. But unlike later cultures that left behind detailed records, the Ubaid people remain largely anonymous. No decipherable texts, no elaborate tombs, no royal inscriptions, only pottery, architectural remains, and these strange terracotta forms. The figurines range in size and style but share a distinctive set of characteristics. Slender limbs, elongated heads, and lizard-like faces with prominent eyes and snouts. Many are posed in active or ceremonial stances. Some appear to be holding objects. A few seem to be wearing what look like helmets or headdresses. Most strikingly, several of them depict what appears to be nurturing or breastfeeding, a gesture often associated with fertility cults or divine motherhood. But why portray such an act with beings that look nothing like humans? Mainstream archaeologists have attempted to frame the figurines within known cultural patterns. Some suggest the lizard-like features are simply stylizations, abstracted artistic forms not meant to be literal. Perhaps they represented local deities or protective spirits associated with fertility, nature, or water. Others propose that the figures were ritualistic, used in ceremonies, or buried as offerings. But such interpretations often feel speculative, fitting a mysterious object into familiar boxes simply because we have no better framework. Why, for instance, do these lizard-like beings appear so consistently across different Ubaid sites, from Eridu to Ur and beyond? Why are their features so detailed, so deliberate? If they were merely symbolic, why choose reptilian traits at all? Reptiles were not commonly venerated in Mesopotamian iconography. Later Sumerian and Akkadian traditions centered around anthropomorphic gods, sky gods, storm gods, sun gods, not cold-blooded creatures of the marsh. And yet, here they are, staring back at us from 7,000 years ago with blank, unreadable eyes. Could they represent an earlier religious belief system, one that predated the anthropocentric pantheons of later Mesopotamian cultures? Some researchers have drawn parallels between the Ubaid figurines and myths from other parts of the world that feature serpentine or reptilian deities. In ancient Egypt, the serpent goddess Wadjet symbolized protection and divine authority. In Mesoamerican mythology, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, represented wisdom and creation. In Hindu cosmology, the Nagas were powerful serpent beings dwelling beneath the earth. Could the Ubaid figures be part of a broader archetypal tradition, one that expressed itself in reptilian form across disparate cultures? Others take a more speculative approach. In recent decades, fringe theorists have pointed to the Ubaid lizard figurines as potential evidence of contact with non-human intelligences. Their elongated skulls and unblinking eyes have been interpreted by some as representations of extraterrestrial beings, visitors from elsewhere, remembered and mythologized by early humans. This interpretation ties into a wider pattern of anomalous humanoid figures in ancient art, from the sky people of Aboriginal Australia to the star beings of North American oral traditions. Still others speculate that these beings were symbolic representations of a lost race, perhaps a non-human species that once lived alongside early humans. The reptilian form, in this view, may have been an evolutionary echo, or a cultural memory encoded in clay. But such theories remain, for now, in the realm of the hypothetical. There is no direct evidence linking the figurines to anything other than the Ubaid context in which they were found. No inscriptions, No corresponding texts, no temples dedicated to reptilian gods. Only these quiet figures, excavated from deep beneath the earth, separated from us by more than 7,000 years. Even from a purely archaeological standpoint, the figurines raise questions. What tools were used to shape them? What pigments, if any, were once painted on their surfaces? Were they made by specialists, commissioned by elites, or passed from hand to hand in village rituals now long forgotten? The craftsmanship suggests intent, an artist not merely replicating a form, but conveying something meaningful, even sacred. Their presence in both domestic and ceremonial contexts hints at layered use. Perhaps they were part of rites of passage, fertility invocations, or ancestral veneration. But without written records, we are left to interpret their message through the mute language of form and symbol. Today, the Ubaid lizard figurines reside in museum cases, in Baghdad, in London, and elsewhere. Visitors pause before them, puzzled, intrigued, occasionally unsettled. They do not resemble anything else from Mesopotamia, or anywhere, and in that singularity lies their power. They challenge the linear narrative of civilization, suggesting that before cities rose and kings ruled, people shaped their world through symbols we no longer understand. Symbols of beings who do not resemble us, yet held a place of deep significance. Why choose these forms? Were they deities, ancestors, spirits of the land? Or are they trying to tell us something we've forgotten? What echoes lie within their elongated skulls, their silent poses? What memories, buried in clay, still wait to be uncovered beneath the sands of ancient Mesopotamia? The figurines do not answer. They only wait, watching, still. Beneath the quiet English town of Royston in Hertfordshire, where neat rows of shops and houses sit peacefully along winding lanes, lies a hidden chamber untouched by the centuries above. Not far from where ancient Roman roads once crossed, a strange, bell-shaped cavern rests silently below the earth, a man-made space carved into solid chalk. Discovered by chance in 1742, when workmen digging a foundation stumbled upon a vertical shaft, Royston Cave revealed itself with eerie precision. Circular, enclosed, and cloaked in darkness, its walls are inscribed with mysterious carvings, symbols, figures, and faces whose meanings still resist full explanation. To step into Royston Cave is to step outside time, into a space where history, myth, and secrecy seem to converge. The chamber is modest in size, roughly 7 meters in diameter and 5 meters high. But what it lacks in scale, it more than makes up for in atmosphere. Dimly lit by artificial lights today, the original chamber would have been lit only by candlelight or oil lamps, casting flickering shadows across the carvings. The central feature is a raised platform or seat, possibly an altar, while a low bench runs along the perimeter. The walls are etched with an astonishing variety of figures: a crucified Christ, a mounted knight, a horned figure, saints, angels, floral patterns, and geometric forms. The carvings appear to span multiple styles and iconographic traditions, layered atop one another like the pages of a book written over and over. Some are Christian in nature: St. Catherine with her spiked wheel, St. Lawrence with his grill, while others seem pagan, perhaps even esoteric. There are swords, stars, rosettes, serpentine shapes, and what some have described as an image of the green man, a face surrounded by leaves, associated with fertility and rebirth. But no historical records mention Royston Cave before its rediscovery in the 18th century. No known church, abbey, or royal decree refers to it. No document explains its origin or purpose. So who carved it? And why? One of the most enduring theories ties the cave to the Knights Templar. the enigmatic military order that rose to prominence during the Crusades. The Templars had properties across England, including known holdings near Royston. Some of the carvings, such as the mounted knight and symmetrical crosses, do appear consistent with Templar iconography. The chamber's secluded design and altar-like platform also echo the architecture of initiation or ritual spaces, leading some to suggest it was a hidden chapel or meeting place for the order during its decline in the early 14th century, after their persecution by the Church. Yet this theory remains unproven. While the Templars were certainly active in the region, no definitive symbols, such as the unique double cross or seal of the order, have been found within the cave, and radiocarbon dating of material inside the chamber is inconclusive, with few organic remains preserved in the sterile chalk environment. Other scholars believe the cave dates back further still, to the Saxon or even Roman period. Some propose it may have been a Mithraeum, a temple dedicated to the Roman god Mithras, often built underground and used for private ritual gatherings. The circular shape and central platform fit this profile, and the layering of religious symbols over time could reflect successive cultural uses, with later Christian symbols overriding or co-opting earlier pagan ones. Alternatively, some suggest the cave was a medieval hermitage, used by a solitary monk or anchorite whose spiritual withdrawal from society was expressed through the carving of sacred scenes on the walls. The bench, in this view, may have served both practical and ritual functions, a place to sit in meditation, prayer, or penance. But again, no records support this, and the mystery does not stop there. Several carvings defy clear classification. A crowned figure holds an orb and scepter. Another appears to wear a mask or helm. Some figures are incomplete, heads without bodies, hands reaching from abstract forms. Are these unfinished or intentionally cryptic? Some researchers believe the carvings form a narrative sequence, perhaps a visual catechism, intended to instruct initiates in secret knowledge. Others see them as devotional expressions, folk art etched over generations, each hand adding a layer to the cave's evolving iconography. Fringe theories, as always, fill the gaps where evidence fails to reach. Some claim the cave is a pre-Christian sacred site, preserved through centuries by secret societies. Others link it to Celtic Druidism, pointing to symbolic carvings that resemble sun wheels or lunar motifs. A few even suggest that Royston Cave was a center of alchemical practice or hermetic ritual, a chamber of transformation hidden beneath an unassuming English town. Yet the evidence remains elusive. No tools were found, no bones, no pottery, no parchment. The cave is dry and chalky, poorly suited for preserving fragile materials. What is left is stone, shadow, and speculation. Today, Royston Cave is a protected site, accessible to the public but still cloaked in uncertainty. Visitors descend the narrow shaft, stepping down into a circular mystery. The walls whisper with carved figures, their stories half erased by time. In this space, the boundary between past and myth feels thin. The cave invites not just interpretation, but introspection. Why would someone go to such lengths to create a secret chamber beneath the earth? To carve images in silence, in darkness, for no one, or perhaps for the chosen few? Was Royston Cave a sanctuary, or a shrine, a prison, or a portal, a place of faith, fear, or forbidden knowledge? The answers, like the light that once flickered on its chalk walls, remain dim. What we know is only the surface. Beneath that, like the cave itself, lies a deeper enigma. And we must ask, how many more hidden places like this lie buried beneath our feet, waiting to be rediscovered? What sacred stories remain, etched in forgotten stone, still whispering from the shadows of the ancient world? In the warm, wind-swept heart of the Mediterranean, where olive groves roll toward the sea and sunlight dances across the ancient stones of Crete, a curious artifact rests in quiet confinement. Housed in a glass case within the Heraclean Archaeological Museum, it looks, at first glance, like a simple terracotta disc, baked earth, unassuming. Yet upon closer inspection, its surface reveals a spiral of stamped symbols, strange, elegant, and wholly unlike anything else in the ancient world. This is the Phaistos Disc, arguably the most enigmatic object of the Bronze Age and one of the greatest undeciphered puzzles in archaeology. Discovered in 1908 by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier, the disc was found buried beneath the ruins of the Minoan Palace at Phaistos, on Crete's southern coast. It lay within a small basement chamber, accompanied by little more than a few pottery shards, no inscriptions, no context, no clues to guide interpretation. Yet the disc itself was instantly striking. Roughly 16 centimeters in diameter, the clay had been pressed with an array of 241 symbols, arranged in a spiral from the outer edge inward, covering both sides of the disc. The symbols, created using pre-formed stamps, represent a variety of figures: human profiles, birds, fish, tools, plants, helmets, arrows, and abstract shapes. In total, 45 distinct characters repeat in various combinations, grouped into 61 words or segments. What sets the Phaistos disc apart is not just its symbolism, but its method of creation. It is, in essence, the earliest known example of movable type, a system of stamped symbols applied to clay in a manner eerily reminiscent of printing over 3,000 years before Gutenberg's press. Yet for all its apparent sophistication, the disc remains a linguistic orphan. It cannot be read. It cannot be translated. Its language is unknown, its script is unique, and its meaning, religious, administrative, poetic, or otherwise, is locked behind layers of time and silence. Was it a hymn, a ritual, a legal decree, a game, a prayer? No one knows. Mainstream scholars have proposed various theories. Some believe the disc represents a syllabic script, a form of proto-writing related to Linear A, the still undeciphered language used by the Minoans. Others have pointed to potential connections with Anatolian or Cypriot writing systems. But the disc's brevity, the lack of other examples or longer inscriptions, makes comparative analysis nearly impossible. With no bilingual key like the Rosetta Stone, no accompanying artifacts, and no parallel texts, the disc remains stubbornly mute. Complicating matters further is the question of authenticity. For decades, a small but persistent group of skeptics has questioned whether the disc is a genuine artifact or a clever forgery. The use of stamps, the isolation of the find, and the lack of similar objects have led some to suspect it may have been created in the early 20th century, either as a hoax or a misguided experiment. Yet extensive examinations of the clay and stylistic features by experts have found no evidence of modern tampering, and the disc remains officially accepted as authentic. Even among those who accept its antiquity, opinions diverge sharply. Some linguists have attempted partial decodings, identifying patterns that suggest repeating suffixes or possible grammatical rules. A few even claim to have translated sections, asserting religious content, dedications to goddesses, or even mythical narratives. But these translations remain hotly contested and lack consensus in the academic community. Outside mainstream archaeology, more speculative interpretations have taken hold. Certain fringe theorists propose that the disc encodes mathematical or astronomical data, perhaps serving as a calendar or navigational tool. Others have linked its spiral structure to esoteric symbology, suggesting it represents a journey, a cosmological map, or a spiritual chant. Still others draw attention to the disc's physical design, arguing that the spiral should be read aloud as a chant or incantation, an ancient spoken performance encoded in terracotta. And, as often occurs with the unexplained, there are those who look beyond our world entirely, suggesting the disc is a message of non-human origin, a token of ancient contact with advanced beings, or even a relic from a forgotten civilization predating recorded history. Yet amidst the debate, the object itself remains unchanged, simple, mysterious, perfectly preserved. Its symbols, some whimsical, some haunting, continue to invite interpretation. A man in a feathered headdress, a bird with outstretched wings, a flower, a shield, a plumed arrow. What stories do they tell, marching inward along the spiral as if guiding the reader into a secret core of meaning? The Minoans themselves remain elusive. Though they built grand palaces, created elaborate frescoes, and traded across the Aegean, their written records, particularly those in Linear A, still resist translation. They left behind no epics, no annals, no royal edicts carved in stone, just fragments of language, glimpses of ceremony, and mysteries like the Phaistos Disc, waiting to be understood. And so the disc remains as it has been for over a century, at the intersection of fact and wonder. What culture created this singular artifact, and why only once? Was it a prototype, a sacred object, a portable ritual, or something else entirely? Something we have no frame of reference to even imagine? If we could read it, what would it tell us? Not just about the Minoans, but about the origins of writing, the transmission of ideas, and the hidden threads of meaning passed between civilizations. In the soft light of the museum case, the Phaistos Disc continues to offer no answers, only symbols, only silence. Yet perhaps, somewhere in its spiral, the past is still speaking, waiting for the moment when we finally learn how to listen. Where the sun sets over the southwestern edge of the Iberian Peninsula and the Guadalquivir River winds slowly toward the Atlantic, a land once flourished that today exists more in legend than in stone. Here, among the salt marshes, dunes, and fertile plains of what is now Andalusia, echoes a name spoken by ancient Greeks and Phoenicians alike, a name tied to wealth, mystery, and sudden disappearance. This was Tartessos, a kingdom of gold and prophecy, revered for its prosperity and lost without clear cause. It is a civilization remembered not through its own voice, but through the wonder and silence of others. Classical sources describe Tartessos as a rich and ancient land, situated beyond the Pillars of Hercules at the edge of the known world. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, mentions the Tartessians as a people who lived in harmony with the Greeks, ruled by a just and generous king named Arganthonios, who allegedly reigned for 80 years. He welcomed Greek traders and even offered them sanctuary when their city of Phocaea was under threat. According to Herodotus, Arganthonios lived long and ruled wisely, a figure more mythic than historical. But for all these glowing references, the Tartessians themselves left few traces. No great city has been uncovered, no royal tombs, no carved stelae bearing the names of their kings. Their language, if they had one distinct from surrounding peoples, remains undeciphered. Their script, found on scattered ceramic fragments and metal objects, has resisted full translation. It is a ghost of a civilization, glimpsed only through the writings of outsiders and the fragments pulled from the Spanish soil. So what was Tartessos? Archaeologists have long sought to locate its heart, its capital, its palaces, its temples. Many point to the site of Huelva near the river's mouth, or further inland to areas near modern-day Seville, where Bronze Age settlements have been uncovered showing signs of sophisticated metallurgy and trade. The Tartessians were known to the Phoenicians, who came west in search of tin and silver, establishing trading posts along the Iberian coast. And indeed, the region is rich in mineral wealth. The Rio Tinto mines, still active today, may have once fed the smithies of Tartessos, forging goods that found their way across the Mediterranean. Artifacts attributed to Tartessian culture include beautifully worked gold jewelry, bronze tools, and ornately decorated ceramics. In 1958, a set of unusual gold plaques known as the Carambolo treasure was discovered near Seville, delicate, finely crafted, and clearly designed for ceremonial use. Some scholars believe these were offerings to a local deity, or perhaps adornments for a high priest. But were they Tartessian or Phoenician, or evidence of cultural fusion between native Iberian peoples and Eastern traders? The lines blur. Some archaeologists argue that Tartessos was less a centralized kingdom than a confederation of wealthy polities connected by trade and religious rites. Others suggest it was a true state, with a capital now buried beneath layers of mud and time, perhaps swallowed by natural disaster, flood, or war. Then, just as Tartessos was becoming known to the wider Mediterranean world, it vanished. By the 5th century BC, references to Tartessos in Greek literature cease. The name disappears. Trade connections with the eastern Mediterranean wane. The region's material culture shifts. The sophisticated artifacts of earlier periods give way to more modest forms. Something changed, abruptly. What happened? Some scholars point to environmental causes. The Guadalquivir River Delta, constantly shifting due to sedimentation and erosion, may have altered the course of trade routes. Flooding or rising sea levels could have submerged important coastal settlements. Others suspect internal decline, perhaps brought on by over-reliance on foreign trade or by conflict with encroaching Iberian tribes. Still others look outward. The rise of Carthage in the western Mediterranean during this period might have disrupted earlier networks dominated by Phoenician cities. The destruction of Phoenician power centers in the east, particularly Tyre and Sidon, may have sent economic shockwaves westward, cutting Tartessos off from its most vital partners. And then there are the legends. Some propose that Tartessos and Atlantis, Plato's fabled lost civilization, are one and the same. The location fits, loosely, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, rich in metals, destroyed in a cataclysm. Plato described Atlantis as a powerful kingdom that sank beneath the sea after falling out of favor with the gods. Could Tartessos have inspired this tale, or did both names preserve distant echoes of an even older memory? A more grounded possibility links Tartessos to the enigmatic stele culture of southwestern Iberia, stone monuments carved with stylized human figures, weapons, and symbols. Some believe these stelae represent elite Tartessian warriors or ancestors, but without a deciphered language, such interpretations remain speculative. In recent years, remote sensing and satellite imaging have revealed what some believe to be submerged urban grids in the marshes of Doñana National Park, ancient foundations beneath the mud, potentially consistent with the location of Tartessos. Excavations are ongoing, and debate remains fierce. Was Tartessos a city swallowed by water, or an idea, part trade hub, part myth, born of cultural convergence between indigenous Iberians and foreign sailors? Was it ever a singular kingdom at all? In the end, Tartessos remains tantalizingly out of reach. We see its reflection in the writings of Herodotus, in the gleam of gold ornaments buried beneath Spanish fields, in the faded symbols of broken ceramics. We trace its shadow through time, hoping for a moment of clarity, for a city unearthed, a script deciphered, a voice from the past at last made audible. But until that day, the enigma of Tartessos stands, not as a failure of history, but as a reminder of its fragility, of how even the most prosperous cultures can fade into silence, their names surviving only as whispers carried across the sea. And we must ask, how many more Tartessos lie buried beneath the landscapes we think we know? How many golden cities wait to be remembered? In the heart of southern Africa, where golden savannas stretch toward distant hills and the breeze whispers through mopane trees, there rises a structure unlike any other on the continent. Towering granite walls curve and weave through the Zimbabwean landscape, silent, ancient, commanding. They are dry-fitted, unmortared, yet meticulously placed, forming enclosures, towers, and passageways with precision and care. This is Great Zimbabwe, once a thriving city and center of power, trade, and culture. Today it stands as a ruin, majestic in its decay, mysterious in its silence. And perhaps most perplexing of all, no one knows exactly why it was abandoned. Located near the present-day town of Masvingo, Great Zimbabwe was the heart of a powerful kingdom that flourished between the 11th and 15th centuries AD. At its peak, it may have supported a population of over 18,000 people, making it one of the largest pre-colonial urban centers in sub-Saharan Africa. Its name, derived from the Shona term Dzimba Dza Mabwe, houses of stone, refers not just to the monumental architecture, but to the cultural legacy that still resonates with the region's people today. The most iconic structures at the site include the Great Enclosure, with walls reaching 11 meters high and extending for over 250 meters, and the Hill Complex, a rocky acropolis believed to have been the seat of the elite or royal class. Built from locally quarried granite, the masonry showcases an extraordinary knowledge of construction. Walls curving in graceful arcs, interlocking without mortar, held together by nothing more than friction, balance, and ancient skill. For centuries, European explorers, missionaries, and colonial powers refused to believe that such an architectural feat could have been created by indigenous Africans. The structures were falsely attributed to foreign builders, Phoenicians, Arabs, or even biblical figures from Palestine. These claims, rooted in racial prejudice, have long been discredited. Today, it is widely accepted that Great Zimbabwe was built by the ancestors of the Shona people, whose descendants still live throughout the region. Yet even with this acknowledgement, a deeper mystery remains. Why was this magnificent city, so well placed, so strategically powerful, abandoned? Archaeological evidence paints a picture of a sophisticated society. Great Zimbabwe was a hub of long-distance trade, linking the African interior to the Indian Ocean coast. Chinese porcelain, Persian glassware, and Arab coins have all been unearthed at the site, testifying to its far-reaching connections. Gold and ivory, mined and collected from surrounding regions, were exported through the port city of Sofala in modern-day Mozambique. In return, Great Zimbabwe imported luxury goods, enriching its elite and enhancing its prestige. The city was not merely economic, it was spiritual, political, and cultural. Soapstone bird carvings, believed to have been symbols of royal or ancestral authority, have been found throughout the site. These iconic sculptures, elegant and abstract, now serve as national symbols, even appearing on Zimbabwe's modern flag. But by the late 15th century, the city began to decline. By the time Portuguese explorers reached the region in the early 1500s, Great Zimbabwe was already abandoned, its walls slowly crumbling back into the earth. So what caused the fall of this once great civilization? Mainstream explanations point first to environmental degradation. The land around Great Zimbabwe may have become overexploited. Intensive agriculture, combined with grazing livestock and a growing population, likely led to deforestation and soil exhaustion. With the fertility of the land depleted and local resources stretched thin, sustaining a large urban population may have become increasingly difficult. Another likely factor was the shifting of trade routes. As other centers emerged, most notably the Mutapa State to the north, Great Zimbabwe may have lost its control over gold and ivory exports. With the rise of new regional powers and the movement of coastal trade hubs, the city's economic relevance diminished. Political fragmentation and internal power struggles could have further weakened its position. Yet even these explanations feel incomplete. Why did the city fall so quickly? Why is there so little evidence of conflict or disaster? No signs of conquest, no mass graves, no widespread destruction, only a slow, dignified disappearance. It's as if the people simply walked away. Some archaeologists speculate that religious or cultural shifts may have played a role. Did a change in ritual practice or belief systems lead to the relocation of spiritual authority? Did drought or climate change render the site not just unsustainable, but uninhabitable in spiritual terms? In some cultures, sacred centers are moved not for pragmatic reasons, but for cosmological ones, tied to cycles of the earth, the ancestors, or the stars. More speculative theories, though unsupported by hard evidence, have suggested hidden treasures, lost tombs, or royal secrets buried beneath the stones. Some even whisper of ceremonial power centers hidden in the surrounding hills, waiting to be rediscovered. Yet, the site has never yielded written records, inscriptions, or clues to its own narrative. The people of Great Zimbabwe left no scrolls, no codices, only the memory etched in stone and earth. The very silence of the site adds to its mystique. The granite walls, curving and rising without a single written word, evoke power without explanation. The hill complex, surrounded by natural rock formations, seems designed for secrecy and observance. The enclosures hint at social stratification, yet no palaces or royal graves have been definitively identified. Who ruled here? What laws did they follow? What gods did they honor? And when they left, where did they go? Today, Great Zimbabwe stands as both a symbol of African ingenuity and a riddle left by time. It reminds us that civilizations rise and fall, not always with fire and blood, but sometimes in silence, and for reasons still unknown. Was the abandonment of Great Zimbabwe a response to ecological collapse, political evolution, or something more elusive? Something buried in belief, ritual, or prophecy? And could it be that the final answers still lie hidden, beneath the soil, within the hills, or in the whispered oral histories passed down among the Shona? The ruins do not answer. They only endure, watching, waiting, holding the shape of a forgotten world, carved from stone and memory. High upon the central Anatolian plateau, where the landscape rolls in quiet, windswept waves of earth and stone, lie the scattered remains of one of the great powers of the ancient world. Crumbling walls, fallen gates, and forgotten temples mark the once mighty capital of Hattusa, a city of citadels and archives, where kings ruled and scribes recorded in the script of cuneiform. This was the beating heart of the Hittite Empire, a Bronze Age superpower that rivaled Egypt and Babylon in both influence and ambition. And then, it was gone. By the late 13th century BC, the Hittites were at their height. From their mountain stronghold in what is now modern-day Turkey, they controlled vast territories, stretching south into the Levant and eastward toward the fringes of Mesopotamia. Their armies were disciplined and feared. Their diplomacy was refined, producing treaties that survive to this day. Most famously, the peace accord with Ramses II of Egypt, following the bloody standoff at the Battle of Kadesh around 1274 BC. Their gods were many, their bureaucracy complex, their capital, Hattusa, encircled by massive stone walls and fortified gates adorned with lions and sphinxes, stood as a testament to order, control, and sacred kingship. And then, sometime around 1200 BC, the Hittite Empire collapsed. The great city of Hattusa was abandoned. Its archives fell silent. Its trade routes dissolved into dust. The empire that had stood for centuries simply vanished from history. Why? The disappearance of the Hittites remains one of the central puzzles of the Late Bronze Age collapse, a period of simultaneous decline that saw the fall of major civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean. Mycenaean Greece, Ugarit, the Kassite dynasty of Babylon, and the Hittites all fell within decades of one another. But while we can trace the ruins, the smoke, and the scars of that era, the precise causes remain elusive. Mainstream scholars propose a convergence of pressures. Drought is one of the most compelling. Paleoclimatic data from tree rings and sediment cores indicate a prolonged period of aridity around 1200 BC across Anatolia and the Near East. For an empire dependent on agriculture and tightly managed food distribution, even a few years of failed harvests could have been catastrophic. Famine may have weakened the population, triggered internal unrest, and diminished the power of the central government to hold its outlying territories. Compounding the crisis, external invasions and migrations added pressure to the crumbling frontiers. The Sea Peoples, an enigmatic confederation of seafaring raiders, are known from Egyptian records to have devastated cities along the eastern Mediterranean coast. While the full extent of their incursions into Anatolia is debated, they may have disrupted Hittite vassal states or interfered with vital maritime trade. Then there are the Assyrians, rising to power in the east. In the decades surrounding the Hittite collapse, Assyrian texts speak of campaigns in former Hittite regions, suggesting a power vacuum the Assyrians were eager to fill. Were the Hittites defeated in battle, or had they already retreated into fragmentation and silence? Internally, the Hittite state may have suffered from its own complexity. The empire relied on a delicate balance of regional governors, client kings, and vassal territories, all held together by royal authority, military strength, and a constant flow of resources. With climate instability, waning control over trade routes, and potential leadership crises, this intricate system may have collapsed under its own weight. There are hints of dynastic conflict, succession disputes, and betrayal. Stories scattered across tablets and diplomatic letters that end abruptly, as if cut off mid-thought. And yet, there is something about the Hittite fall that still feels incomplete. Hattusa was not destroyed by fire or conquest. It appears to have been deliberately abandoned. Stone structures were left standing, archives left intact. It is as if the capital was vacated with grim ceremony, an orderly departure rather than a chaotic rout. Where did the people go? And why did they leave no clear explanation behind? Some scholars propose that the Hittites did not vanish completely, but splintered. In the centuries following the fall, so-called Neo-Hittite states emerged in northern Syria and southeastern Anatolia, smaller kingdoms bearing cultural and linguistic ties to their imperial predecessor. Inscriptions in Luwian hieroglyphs and administrative practices point to continuity, if not centralization. Were these outposts remnants of the old elite, or successor states born from collapse and adaptation? And what of the Hittite language? Once etched in clay in neat cuneiform, it disappeared from human knowledge for millennia, only rediscovered in the 20th century through painstaking decipherment. How much more remains unread, still buried beneath the soil of Boğazköy and other forgotten sites? As with so many mysteries of the ancient world, the gaps in our knowledge invite speculation. Were there unknown pandemics, plagues that struck silently and left no visible scars? Did religious transformation, political revolution, or mass migration lead to the dissolution of an empire once thought unshakable? Some more fringe voices have even wondered about astronomical events, comets, solar disruptions, or cosmic omens misinterpreted as divine wrath. Still others view the Hittite collapse as a cautionary tale of interconnectedness, an empire tied too tightly to global networks of trade, diplomacy, and shared resources, may become vulnerable to chain reactions of collapse. When one link breaks, the rest begin to fall. Whatever the cause, the fall of the Hittite Empire remains a haunting silence in the archaeological record. A quiet end to a world of temples, treaties, and warrior kings. A vast administrative machine, ground to a halt by forces we still do not fully understand. What final decision was made in the great halls of Hattusa before its doors were closed forever? What last message was left uncarved, unspoken? And what fragments, still buried in stone, still waiting in clay, might one day offer us a voice from the final days of the Hittites? The winds still move through the Anatolian plateau, the stones remain, and somewhere beneath them, history still holds its breath. Beneath the grey skies and rolling green hills of West Dunbartonshire, Scotland, where damp heather grows thick around quiet fields and moss clings to ancient stone walls, a vast slab of rock lies buried, both by time and by design. When unearthed, it stretches nearly 43 feet across, its surface a dense constellation of carved symbols, spirals, rings, radial lines, and concentric circles connected by deep grooves. Some seem random, others placed with purpose. This is the Cochno Stone, one of the most extraordinary prehistoric artworks in all of Europe, and one of its most enduring enigmas. First brought to public attention in 1887 by the Reverend James Harvey, the Cochno Stone lies on the edge of the former mining village of Faifley, just northwest of Glasgow. Though the local community had long known of its existence, it was Harvey's description and early sketches that drew the wider academic world to take notice. What they saw amazed and puzzled them in equal measure. Spanning nearly 90 square meters, the Cochno Stone is covered with over 90 cup and ring markings. Some simple depressions surrounded by single rings, others forming complex, interlinked designs radiating across the stone's broad, undulating surface. The carvings belong to a tradition of prehistoric art known broadly as cup and ring marks, a form of petroglyphic expression found throughout the British Isles, as well as in parts of continental Europe. Typically dated to the Neolithic or early Bronze Age, roughly between 3000 and 2000 BC, these markings predate writing in the region and appear to have held significant meaning to the communities that carved them. But what did they mean? That question, like the symbols themselves, resists easy interpretation. Archaeologists have long debated their function. Were they maps, marking territories, water sources, or sacred sites? Were they calendars, tools for astronomical observation, or spiritual symbols intended to guide the soul through other realms? Were they purely decorative, or did they encode a language now lost to time? The Cochno Stone amplifies those questions. Its sheer size and density of markings far exceed most other examples. It isn't a scattering of isolated symbols. It's a canvas, a deliberate composition that seems to invite both attention and reverence. Some mainstream interpretations suggest the carvings could have served ceremonial purposes. The stone may have been a ritual site, a gathering place for seasonal observances or rites of passage. Its position, on elevated ground with wide views of the surrounding landscape, could have enhanced its symbolic power. Alignments with the sun, moon, or stars have been proposed, though not conclusively established. Others have pointed to the spatial arrangement of the carvings. Certain clusters appear to echo the forms of celestial constellations, or to trace the contours of the surrounding hills. Could this be a prehistoric cosmogram? An ancient attempt to mirror the heavens upon the earth? But despite the centuries of speculation, no definitive answer has emerged. The story of the Cochno Stone takes an unusual turn in the modern era. In 1965, fearing damage from weathering, graffiti, and urban expansion, authorities made the unusual decision to rebury the stone beneath layers of soil and protective sheeting. For over 50 years, it remained hidden from view, preserved but also silenced. It wasn't until 2015 that a team led by archaeologist Dr. Kenny Brophy from the University of Glasgow sought permission to uncover the stone once more. Using state-of-the-art 3D imaging, photogrammetry, and non-invasive mapping, they digitally documented the carvings in exquisite detail. What they revealed confirmed what had long been suspected. The Cochno Stone is not only one of the largest and most intricate examples of prehistoric rock art in Britain, it may also be one of the most conceptually complex. In addition to the prehistoric motifs, later inscriptions had been added. Crosses, initials, and dates from more recent centuries, likely carved by those who encountered the stone before its burial. Even these markings add layers to its story, suggesting a long-standing reverence for the site, if not understanding. Speculative theories, unsurprisingly, have flourished around the stone's mystery. Some propose that the Cochno Stone represents a prehistoric map, not of land, but of spiritual pathways or interdimensional routes. Others suggest the concentric rings represent portals, thresholds between worlds, or the vibrations of sound. The placement of the cup marks, when viewed as nodes or points of energy, has led some to associate the site with ancient geomantic or shamanic practices. A more fringe idea links the stone to ancient aliens, interpreting the carvings as star charts or landing patterns. Such theories, while popular in speculative media, find little support among archaeologists, but they speak to the powerful grip the stone holds on the imagination. Yet even when stripped of speculation, the Cochno Stone remains deeply compelling. Who were the people who carved it? What tools did they use to etch such precise, flowing lines into solid rock? How long did it take to complete? And most of all, what were they trying to say? The stone itself offers no answer. It gives us a language without a key, a message carved in permanence, yet left without context. It is both presence and absence, a monument of memory, yet with no known name or author. Today, the Cochno Stone remains buried once more, protected from erosion, yet hidden from view. But its digital twin now lives online, open to study and exploration. As technology advances and our understanding of prehistoric life deepens, perhaps we will one day get closer to deciphering its meaning. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the Cochno Stone was never meant to be decoded, but experienced. Perhaps its purpose lies not in clarity, but in connection, in bridging the vast silence between our world and one that vanished over 4,000 years ago. As we look upon its spirals and rings, we're drawn into that silence, and we are left to wonder, were these symbols carved for gods, for the dead, for the stars? Or were they left for us, guarded beneath earth and time, waiting to be understood? The stone remains, quiet, unanswered, timeless. From the carved stone whispers of prehistoric Scotland, our gaze shifts dramatically, across oceans, through centuries, and deep into the emerald maze of South America. Here, in the sweltering humidity of the Amazon rainforest, life hums in an endless green tangle. Vines coil around ancient tree trunks, insects buzz unseen, and every step forward sinks into the unknown. In this place where the jungle breathes like a living thing, an old question still echoes beneath the canopy. Could a great civilization have once thrived here, hidden in the shadows of the forest? They called it the Lost City of Z. To the Western world, the legend of Z is most famously tied to British explorer Lieutenant Colonel Percy Fawcett, a man whose obsession with the unknown would come to define his life and legacy. In the early 20th century, Fawcett was already an experienced surveyor and adventurer, charting remote borders in South America on behalf of the Royal Geographical Society. But something in the jungle called to him, something older, grander, and entirely undocumented by modern science. In 1925, Fawcett set out from the town of Cuiabá in Brazil, accompanied by his son Jack and Jack's friend Raleigh Rimmel. Their destination was a remote area of the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso. Fawcett believed that somewhere in the uncharted heart of the forest lay the ruins of an advanced pre-Columbian city. He called it Z, not based on any indigenous name, but as a placeholder for an idea that refused to be silenced. They were never seen again. The disappearance of Fawcett and his party ignited a frenzy of speculation. Over the next few decades, numerous expeditions tried to follow his trail. Some perished, others turned back, and a few claimed to have seen strange things: overgrown ruins, stepped mounds, stone walls swallowed by jungle. But no one found Fawcett, and no one found Z. Was it all a fantasy? Mainstream scholars of the time were skeptical. The dominant view held that the Amazon basin, with its poor soils and harsh environment, could not support large urban centers. Indigenous societies were often viewed, incorrectly, as small, scattered, and technologically unsophisticated. But a growing body of evidence has begun to challenge that narrative. In recent years, archaeologists using satellite imaging and LiDAR technology have detected vast geometric earthworks, long-forgotten road systems, and even planned settlements beneath the Amazon canopy. These discoveries point to a level of organization that once seemed unthinkable. Some regions, like the Upper Xingu, reveal networks of interconnected villages, ceremonial centers, and agricultural fields, built not randomly, but with purpose and design. Could these findings be the first tangible evidence of what Fawcett called Z? It's worth noting that Fawcett's belief wasn't based on fantasy alone. He had read ancient Portuguese manuscripts, particularly a 1753 document called the Manuscript 512, which claimed that explorers in Brazil had stumbled upon a ruined city deep in the jungle, complete with archways, inscriptions, and statues of unknown gods. Though widely considered apocryphal, the manuscript was enough to stir Fawcett's imagination, and perhaps a deeper truth buried beneath colonial mythology. Fawcett also believed that Z predated the Inca and may have had links to ancient civilizations farther north or even across the Atlantic. While these ideas pushed into speculative territory, they mirrored a common question of his time. What if the jungle was not a barrier to civilization, but a cradle of it? There are stories from indigenous communities, too. Oral traditions that speak of vanished cities, of gods who once walked among people, and of stone structures swallowed by vines and forgotten by time. These accounts, often dismissed by early European explorers, are now being re-examined as vital pieces of a larger historical puzzle. Still, the search for Z remains elusive. Was it a single city, like El Dorado, built in stone and gold? Or was it a complex of settlements, interlinked and governed by knowledge of the land that Western eyes had failed to comprehend? Some fringe theories stretch even farther. They propose ancient transoceanic contact, lost Atlantean outposts, or extraterrestrial influence, ideas that find little support in academic circles, yet persist because of the profound silence that surrounds the jungle's past. Others suggest that Z, if it existed, was destroyed long before Fawcett's time, swallowed not only by the forest, but by disease, conquest, and colonial erasure. The arrival of Europeans in the Americas brought epidemics that decimated indigenous populations, often before direct contact was ever made. Cities may have emptied not in battle, but in silence, abandoned to the vines and the rain. So what did Fawcett find? Did he reach something resembling Z only to perish before reporting it? Was he killed by hostile tribes, as some have speculated? Or did he choose to stay, as whispers from the forest occasionally claim? In 1951, a man named Orlando Vilas Boas interviewed members of an Amazonian tribe who claimed to have seen 3 white men in the jungle decades earlier. Were they Fawcett and his companions? Or was this just another legend, blending fact and folklore in the endless green? Today, the lost city of Z remains one of the Amazon's most beguiling mysteries. Expeditions continue, now with GPS, drones, and LiDAR instead of machetes and guesswork. Yet the jungle still holds its secrets close. Could it be that beneath the vast canopy, in places no human has yet walked in centuries, remnants of a forgotten civilization still lie untouched? And if so, what might they tell us? Not just about the people who built them, but about the stories we choose to believe? Sometimes the past does not vanish, it hides. And sometimes, the greatest discoveries are not the ones we make with maps and machines, but the ones that reshape how we see the world around us. The jungle waits, silent, watching, and somewhere within its ancient heartbeat, the question lingers: was Z ever real? Or is the legend itself what we were meant to find all along? As the echo of lost cities fades into the mist of the Amazon, we journey to a land where the stones speak in circles, and time winds inward like a spiral. Beneath the wide and open skies of the Golan Heights, where basalt plains stretch out in every direction and the wind carries whispers through the dry grass, there lies a forgotten monument. A series of concentric stone rings, weathered and worn, yet still defiant against the slow erasure of centuries. This is Rujm el-Hiri, massive, ancient, and utterly enigmatic. From above, it resembles a stone labyrinth, 5 circles in total, with a central burial mound. The largest ring spans nearly 160 meters in diameter, and all are constructed from piles of dark volcanic basalt, a stone common in the Golan but heavy, difficult to shape, and demanding in effort. In Arabic, Rujm el-Hiri translates to the stone heap of the wildcat, a name that hints at both the mystery of its purpose and the danger of its forgotten past. Archaeologists estimate the site was built between 3000 and 2700 BC, placing it squarely in the early Bronze Age, though some argue that certain features may date even earlier. But here, the certainties end. For while the construction is undeniable, its meaning remains cloaked in uncertainty. Who built Rujm el-Hiri? And more importantly, why? The monument's structure defies simple categorization. Unlike megalithic tombs in Europe or ziggurats in Mesopotamia, Rujm el-Hiri lacks a clear precedent. Its layout is precise, each ring aligned and the inner passageways carefully designed. But there are no written records, no clear religious symbols, and no cultural lineage linking it directly to the civilizations that followed. One of the few tangible clues is found at the center, a tumulus or burial cairn about 4.5 meters high. But even this complicates the story. Excavations suggest that the central tomb was added later, during the Middle Bronze Age. If true, then the rings predate the burial, raising a deeper question. What was the site's original function? Several mainstream theories have been proposed. One suggests the circles served as a ceremonial center, a place of ritual gathering, possibly tied to seasonal or astronomical events. Another proposes that it was used for funerary processions, with the rings acting as symbolic boundaries between the worlds of the living and the dead. But these theories, while plausible, are incomplete. In the 1980s, researchers noticed something peculiar. During the summer solstice, sunlight streams through one of the site's eastern openings and directly illuminates the central cairn. Other alignments suggest the builders may have tracked celestial movements, perhaps marking solstices, equinoxes, or lunar cycles. Could Rujm el-Hiri have functioned as an ancient observatory, akin to Stonehenge or Nopta Playa? The possibility is intriguing. But why here, in this remote basalt plateau, far from the major Bronze Age population centers? And why so large, with no obvious signs of permanent settlement nearby? Some have turned to local legend for answers. Druze oral traditions, which permeate the region, speak of giants who once walked the land, builders of stone who raised monuments before the age of kings. Biblical references to the Rephaim, a race of ancient giants, have also been linked, though more through myth than archaeology. Interestingly, Rujm el-Hiri's Hebrew name is Gilgal Rephaim, or Circle of the Giants. Could these legends preserve a sliver of truth, echoes of a long-forgotten people, remembered not by records but by stones? More fringe theories abound. Some posit that Rujm el-Hiri is part of an ancient energy grid, one of many power centers scattered across the earth, aligned to mysterious ley lines. Others see extraterrestrial connections, interpreting the concentric rings and solar alignments as signs of contact or transmission. There are even claims that Rujm el-Hiri was a portal of some kind, a crossing point between physical and metaphysical realms. Though these theories fall outside mainstream archaeology, they persist, fed by the site's refusal to yield a singular explanation. Adding to the mystery is the sheer effort required to build it. It's estimated that over 40,000 tons of basalt were moved, by hand, without the aid of draft animals or wheeled carts. There's no sign of mortar, yet the stones remain in place. For a culture with no written language, no monumental architecture elsewhere in the region, and no apparent hierarchy, this would have been a massive undertaking. A communal act of devotion, perhaps, or a message intended for someone, or something, far beyond. Despite decades of research, Rujm el-Hiri remains largely untouched by tourism and seldom visited even by locals. The region's history, intertwined with political tensions and restricted military zones, has often kept it out of reach, both physically and academically, but its silence endures. In 2016, high-resolution mapping revealed previously unnoticed patterns within the rings, minor asymmetries and subtle deviations that may indicate deeper symbolic meaning. And still, no artifacts have been found to link it definitively to a known cultural group. No inscriptions, no tools, only the stones and the empty air between them. What was the intention behind this design? Was it a spiritual site, echoing chants and footsteps under the solstice sun? Was it a celestial clock, tuned to the rhythms of the stars? Or was it a monument to memory itself? A prehistoric riddle left to outlast empires. And if we could understand it, what might it reveal? Not just about the people who built it, but about the nature of mystery itself. In a world mapped, measured, and digitized, Rujm el-Hiri resists classification. It exists in a liminal space, between archaeology and myth, between certainty and speculation. The rings do not spiral inward. They spiral outward, toward questions we may never answer. But perhaps that's the point. Some places are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be felt, to be wondered at. To remind us that even beneath the most familiar skies, the earth still holds secrets. And so we ask, what lies beneath the basalt? What echoes still move between the stones? And what was Rujm el-Hiri truly meant to be? As the sun sets over the Golan Heights and the silent rings of Rujm el-Hiri fall into shadow, we journey far across the globe to a place where mystery stretches not in circles, but in lines that run so straight, so vast, and so enduring, they almost seem like the fingerprints of gods. Welcome to the Bolivian Altiplano. Here, at the feet of snow-capped Mount Sajama, the highest peak in Bolivia, lies a sprawling canvas of interconnected lines, etched not into paper, but across the living earth itself. These are the Sajama Lines, an immense network of nearly imperceptible pathways etched into the arid, dusty crust of the land. They stretch for hundreds of miles across a desolate landscape that seems untouched by time, wind, or decay. From the ground, they are subtle, barely distinguishable from the surrounding terrain. But from above, they become astonishing. Thousands of straight, thin paths crisscross the plateau, forming a massive, intricate web that sprawls over 8,700 square miles, making it the largest known network of geoglyphs in the world, far surpassing the more famous Nazca lines in both scale and complexity. Each individual path is narrow, often no wider than a human step, and carved into the desert by the clearing of the surface stones, revealing a lighter soil beneath. There are no sharp angles, no curves, just lines that run arrow straight, sometimes for tens of kilometers, as if drawn with an enormous ruler across the earth. Who created them, and why? Unlike the Nazca lines of Peru, which feature stylized depictions of animals and geometric shapes, the Sajama lines are entirely linear. They bear no clear symbolic images, only paths. And while their sheer size suggests monumental effort, there are no historical records to explain their construction. The indigenous Aymara people, who have lived in the region for centuries, speak of them with reverence. They are not mere trails, they say. They are sacred. But what does sacred mean in this context? Some archaeologists believe the Sajama lines may have served as ceremonial routes, pathways for pilgrimages that connected sacred sites, shrines, burial towers known as chulpas, and small villages. In this view, the lines were not meant to be seen from above, but walked, traversed slowly, perhaps during religious rituals that honored the mountain spirits or ancestral forces of the land. And yet, the precision of these lines is baffling. Many extend uninterrupted for dozens of miles, despite crossing uneven terrain, ravines, and hills. The feat would be difficult even with modern surveying equipment. Without maps, without aerial views, without wheels or iron tools, how did ancient builders maintain such astonishing straightness? Some researchers suggest that generations of locals, over centuries, maintained these routes through oral traditions and collective memory. Others speculate about basic tools, sighting poles, horizon alignment, and repeated walking. But still, the scale remains staggering. Could there be more to this? Some fringe theorists propose a more esoteric purpose. They argue that the lines may reflect celestial alignments, perhaps mapping the heavens onto the earth, echoing constellations or solstices. Others suggest geodetic functions, theorizing that the lines encode knowledge of Earth's energies or represent a kind of sacred geometry lost to time. Still more radical ideas emerge at the fringes: ancient airfields, ley line networks, or remnants of a long-forgotten civilization with a knowledge of mathematics and cartography that rivals our own. But these theories, though imaginative, lack definitive evidence. And the Sajama lines offer few artifacts. No tools have been found, no inscriptions, no central temple or monument to indicate a single organizing force behind the project. Even their age is uncertain. Because the lines are formed by displacing surface stones, they cannot be carbon dated directly. Some estimates place their origin as early as 3,000 years ago, while others believe they were continually used and reshaped throughout the Inca and post-Inca periods. There is no consensus, only suggestion, only questions. What is remarkable, too, is how little attention the Sajama lines have received from the broader archaeological community. Overshadowed by the fame of the Nazca lines and isolated in a remote region, they remained largely unstudied until the late 20th century, despite their immensity. It wasn't until satellite imagery became widely available that researchers could begin to map their full extent. Yet even with modern technology, the lines remain elusive. There is no master pattern, no blueprint. The lines do not form a grid, nor do they appear entirely random. Instead, they branch, connect, and diverge, like veins, or perhaps like memory itself, etched into the land by generations who may have seen the world through a lens we no longer understand. And perhaps that is the true mystery. Were the Sajama Lines paths for the feet or for the spirit? Were they built to connect communities across a vast and harsh landscape? Or were they an offering to the mountains, to the sky, or to something else entirely? Standing beneath the wide Bolivian sky, one feels dwarfed by the silence. The wind speaks, but it does not explain. The lines endure, not as monuments to conquest or power, but to persistence, to something deeply human, yet inexplicably beyond our current grasp. In the end, the Sajama Lines may not ask to be solved. They may ask only to be witnessed, to be respected. And so, the question remains: why would a people walk in perfect straight lines for miles, across emptiness, across time? What vision moved them? And what, if anything, are we still missing beneath the dust of the Altiplano? The earth holds memories long after voices fall silent. And in the high, dry plateaus of Bolivia, those memories stretch straight into the horizon, inviting us to follow, but never quite revealing where they lead. As the last light of the Bolivian sun fades over the seemingly endless pathways of the Sajama Lines, our search for the unexplained shifts once more, this time deep into the forested ridges of the Ural Mountains in Russia. Here, buried beneath layers of soil and time, lies a stone that may hold a riddle not just of human history, but of our understanding of civilization itself. This is the Dashka Stone. Sometimes called the Map of the Creator, the Dashka Stone is no grand monument or towering ruin. It does not call attention to itself with height or ornate symbols. Yet what it lacks in obvious splendor, it makes up for in chilling peculiarity. It is massive, measuring over 5 feet tall, nearly 4 feet wide, and weighing more than a ton. On its surface is a series of intricately carved lines and patterns that, to the untrained eye, might resemble abstract etchings or geological cracks. But upon closer inspection, the features appear deliberate, patterned, mapped. And that is where the mystery begins. In 1999, a group of researchers led by Russian professor Alexander Shuvirov announced a startling claim. The Dashka Stone might not be a random geological artifact at all, but a detailed, three-dimensional relief map of a region in the Ural Mountains. Specifically, the area near Bashkiria, a mountainous republic in central Russia. They claimed the lines and grooves on the surface matched the river systems, canyons, and topography of the region with uncanny precision. But this was no ordinary map. According to Chuvirov, the Dashka Stone displayed the landscape with a level of detail and elevation mapping not seen until satellite imaging in the 20th century. If true, this would mean that someone, thousands of years ago, created a raised relief map at a scale of 1.1 kilometers per centimeter, a feat of cartographic accuracy that should have been impossible in the ancient world. So who made it? Mainstream archaeologists are skeptical. Many assert that the so-called map is simply the result of natural sedimentation and erosion, pareidolia, they argue, creating the illusion of intention where none exists. Others have noted that the scientific analysis of the stone and its supposed comparison to modern topography has not been subjected to rigorous peer review. But the intrigue deepens. The stone appears to be made from 3 distinct layers. The base is a dense dolomite, forming the main structure. The map itself is carved into a lighter, porcelain-like stone. And above that, a protective layer of calcium suggests an attempt to preserve or shield the object, possibly artificially applied. Such multi-layered construction is highly unusual in natural rock formations, and if it was indeed crafted intentionally, it implies advanced knowledge of material engineering. Further baffling are the strange symbols found alongside the terrain-like markings. Some resemble what Chuvyshov and his team interpreted as a form of pre-Sumerian writing, or perhaps even a mathematical script. Yet no known culture, ancient or modern, has produced writing in the style or pattern found on the stone. The symbols remain undeciphered, and to this day, no other artifact has been found bearing anything similar. Dating the Dashka stone has also proved challenging. According to Chuvyshov, initial tests indicated an age of approximately 120 million years, an age that would clearly predate not only civilization, but humanity itself. This number, drawn from the dolomite layer, has been widely rejected as misleading. The surface carvings, if artificial, would have been added far more recently, though even estimates placing them within the last 10,000 years would still place them well outside the known development of such advanced mapping technologies. And so, the story wavers between two realms, natural oddity and impossible artifact. Could it be that the stone is a rare geological formation misinterpreted as a relic? Or is it evidence of a lost civilization capable of engineering and cartography far beyond what we have previously imagined? Some fringe theorists suggest extraterrestrial contact or a pre-Ice Age civilization wiped from memory by global cataclysms. Others draw parallels to Plato's Atlantis, or ancient myths of gods who once measured the earth and passed their knowledge to early humans. And yet, the stone remains largely unstudied by the wider academic community. After its initial discovery, further excavation at the site was halted. Bureaucratic hurdles, local land rights disputes, and a general air of controversy have stalled deeper investigation. Today, the Dashka stone rests in relative obscurity, kept at a small university in the Russian city of Ufa. It is not featured in international museums. It does not draw crowds of tourists. And perhaps that adds to its mystique. Because if this truly is a map, and not merely a coincidence of nature, then it may be one of the most significant archaeological finds of all time. A stone that shouldn't exist, a map no one could have made. And a question that lingers in the silent hall where the Dashka stone now lies. What if our past is deeper, older, and far more complex than we dare to believe? What civilizations rose and fell before the ones we now know? What knowledge has been buried, not beneath centuries, but eons? The Earth has been writing its own story long before we arrived, and occasionally it leaves behind fragments that don't fit into our timelines or our theories. The Dashka stone may be one such fragment. Real or misread, intentional or illusion, it continues to whisper a question into the heart of anyone who looks upon it. What else lies beneath our feet, undiscovered, waiting, watching, etched in stone by hands we no longer remember? And will we ever learn to read the message, or are we simply too late? As we leave behind the quiet halls of Ufa, where the Dashka stone rests beneath glass and speculation, we journey southeast, across forests, plains, and borders, into the vast expanse of western China. Here, on the edge of the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau, rises a wind-swept, remote peak cloaked in silence and stone. This is Mount Baigong. Isolated and barren, the landscape around Mount Baigong is an austere realm of jagged limestone, red clay, and dry desert air. It seems untouched by time, hostile to life, removed from history. And yet, beneath its surface and etched into its flanks, lies something so unexpected, so out of place, that it has confounded archaeologists, engineers, and geologists alike. These are the Baigong pipes, a network of tubular formations found embedded in the rock, clustered near the mouth of a cave on the mountain's slope, and scattered along the nearby shores of Tosan Lake. They appear at first glance to be industrial relics, corroded metal pipes, hollow and rust-colored, ranging in diameter from a few millimeters to nearly half a meter. Some are vertical and pierce the cave walls like ancient drill lines. Others lie broken along the ground, as though once part of a buried structure long since eroded. Still others stretch toward the salt lake, half submerged in its shallow waters, suggesting to some the remnants of a lost system of conduits or drains. But the question is simple and profound. Who put them there? And when? The local legends offer no clear answers. Ethnic Tibetan and Mongol herders who traverse this land occasionally speak of the mountain in sacred terms, but do not claim to know the origins of the strange pipes. The Chinese government, intrigued by the reports, sent an expedition in 2002 to survey the site. Their findings were inconclusive. Chemical analysis suggested that the pipes were composed primarily of iron oxide, silicon dioxide, and calcium oxide, materials consistent with both natural and artificial origins. Some samples were said to contain radioactive elements in trace amounts. Others had unusual ratios of organic matter, and yet the pipes resisted easy classification. A surprising result emerged from one test conducted by China's Institute of Geology and Mineral Resources. Some of the pipes were dated to around 150,000 years ago, predating any known civilization in the region. However, the dating method, based on fossilized plant material within the pipes, was itself questioned by other scientists, who argued it may not reflect the true age of the structures themselves. So the debate began. One school of thought asserts a natural origin. According to this explanation, the pipes are not man-made at all, but rather the result of a rare process called ferrooxidation, in which groundwater, rich in iron and other minerals, flows through porous rock and gradually forms tubular concretions as the minerals crystallize over millennia. Similar formations have been documented in other parts of the world, but even among geologists, there is hesitation. Many acknowledge that the pipes exhibit more regularity, symmetry, and branching than would typically be expected from purely natural concretions. Some penetrate the rock with unnerving precision. Others appear fused together, forming junctions that, by chance alone, would be statistically improbable. And then there are the more speculative theories. Fringe researchers and alternative historians have long pointed to Mount Baigong as a potential site of ancient advanced technology. They suggest the pipes were once part of a long-lost infrastructure, perhaps an ancient facility, a forgotten mining system, or even, in the most radical theories, evidence of contact with non-human intelligence. The location fuels this speculation. Mount Baigong sits far from any known cradle of civilization. There are no ruins, temples, or historical records to place these pipes in a familiar cultural context. There is only wind, stone, and silence. And yet, the site persists, quietly, stubbornly, a riddle in the rocks. Could there have been an unknown civilization in the region tens of thousands of years ago, capable of metallurgy, construction, and large-scale engineering? Or are we simply misreading the language of geology? What is perhaps most compelling is how the pipes continue to blur the boundary between what is natural and what is not. They neither clearly belong to human hands nor fit neatly into the realm of geological processes. They occupy a strange in-between space, daring us to make sense of their origin. The site has received little international attention. Unlike the Nazca Lines or the pyramids of Egypt, the Baigong pipes have not become a tourist attraction or a UNESCO site. Most of the world remains unaware of their existence, and perhaps that too is part of their allure. Sometimes the most enduring mysteries are not hidden deep beneath the earth, nor locked away in lost libraries. Sometimes they lie in plain sight, untouched, uncelebrated, and unexplained. So what are the Baigong pipes? A trick of geology? A long-forgotten remnant of prehistoric industry? A relic of a world we have not yet begun to understand? In the quiet shadows of Mount Baigong, The winds whistle through hollow tubes. The cave watches without voice. And beneath the red cliffs and dusty plains, something ancient remains, out of place, out of time, and still resisting explanation. The mountain does not speak, but the question lingers. If these pipes are real and not imagined, then who built them? And more hauntingly, what else did they leave behind? As the echo of wind among the hollow Baigong pipes fades into silence, we turn our gaze across the Pacific toward the rugged, arid coast of northern Peru. Here, among shifting sands and bone-dry cliffs, the remnants of an ancient civilization wait, half buried, half erased. Time has tried to silence them, but the earth keeps whispering their story. The Moche, engineers of adobe pyramids, master metallurgists, and artists of stunning ceramic realism, flourished along the desert valleys of the Andes between 100 and 800 AD. Their world was one of complexity and contradiction. They built grand temples layered in gold and blood, worshipped deities with fierce animal faces, and left behind murals of human sacrifice and ritual pageantry that still defy modern interpretation. Yet despite their power, artistry, and engineering sophistication, something happened. By the end of the 8th century, the ruling elite of the Moche had vanished. Their ceremonial centers were abandoned. Their rulers' tombs, once repositories of divine regalia and military prowess, ceased to appear, and in their place, silence. How does a civilization with such cultural momentum simply disappear? The mystery begins in the Huaca del Sol and Huaca de la Luna, two massive temples rising from the desert near modern-day Trujillo. Constructed from millions of adobe bricks, they stand as enduring symbols of Moche authority. At their peak, these temples would have been draped in vibrant murals, echoing with ritual chants and the bloodletting rites of high priests and warrior kings. And yet, by the 9th century, these grand structures lay abandoned, not destroyed, not conquered, just left behind. Mainstream archaeologists point to environmental collapse. Geological studies show that the Moche region was battered by extreme El Niño events during the 6th and 7th centuries, bringing torrential rains, catastrophic flooding, and then years of drought. Entire irrigation networks were destroyed. Crops failed. And when the skies refused to cooperate, the divine power of the Moche rulers, long associated with controlling nature, came into question. But even this explanation feels partial. Despite the environmental stress, the Moche heartland had proven resilient for centuries. Their canals were advanced, their cities adapted, and their decentralized political structure, composed of regional centers rather than a single capital, should have provided redundancy. Yet what we see instead is a sudden and systemic unraveling of elite authority. Why? At the site of Sipan, one of the most lavish burials in the ancient Americas was unearthed in 1987. The Lord of Sipan, interred with gold, silver, feathered headdresses, and guards buried alive to protect him in death. This ruler was part of a lineage that claimed divine power, able to communicate with gods and ancestors through ritual sacrifice and bloodletting. But even as such rulers reached their cultural and religious zenith, something undermined their grip on power. Some scholars suggest internal revolt. Evidence of fortified hilltop refuges and signs of burned ceremonial centers raise the possibility of uprising. Was it the priests and kings who fell victim to their own people, perhaps disillusioned by failed harvests and broken promises? Or was something else at work, something harder to define? The archaeological record offers clues, but not answers. In later phases of Moche culture, elite tombs grow rare. The grand iconography of rulers fades. Art shifts from depictions of powerful ceremonial figures to more ambiguous, abstract scenes, suggesting a change in worldview or a loss of confidence in traditional authority. And then, in the northern regions, we find evidence of something darker. At the Huaca Cao Viejo, archaeologists uncovered a gruesome tableau. The remains of dozens of young men, beheaded, mutilated, and discarded. Nearby murals depict similar scenes of captives marched toward sacrificial platforms. These were not the burials of honored dead, but of human offerings. Was this an escalation of ritual sacrifice meant to appease angry gods in a time of crisis? Or were these mass killings political, the result of conflict between rival factions as the traditional Moche order fractured? Even more strangely, recent excavations at Cerro Blanco and other sites suggest the emergence of alternative belief systems, perhaps even rival cults, gaining power in the vacuum left by the Moche aristocracy. Iconography of new deities, serpent-like beings, masked figures, begin to emerge where the old warrior priest images once dominated. Could the disappearance of the Moche rulers have been less a collapse and more a transformation? A quiet coup not of armies, but of beliefs? There are those who take the questions further still. Some fringe researchers speculate on outside influences, suggesting contact with seafaring cultures from across the Pacific. Others point to the astronomical alignments in Moche temples and posit that celestial events, comets, eclipses, or unexplainable cosmic phenomena may have triggered a crisis of faith so profound it unraveled the very foundation of their elite. But there is no record. The Moche left no writing, no codices. Their language, if it was ever transcribed, is lost. We know them only through their ruins, their art, and the bones they left behind. And perhaps that is the most haunting element of their mystery. They were so advanced, so visually expressive, so steeped in religious ceremony and social order. And then they were gone, like the flicker of a candle, extinguished in a gust of wind. Today, the sands of northern Peru continue to shift, revealing fragments of their story, a golden mask here, a mural there, the remains of a ruler lost to time. Each discovery brings us closer, but never quite close enough. Were the Moche rulers victims of climate, of politics, or of something more elusive, something no tomb can reveal? And if they vanished so completely, with such little trace, how many others have done the same? The Andes still keep their secrets, and in the silence of the desert, one question echoes. What happened to the rulers of the Moche? And what does their disappearance say about how fragile even the greatest powers can be when the world, or the people beneath them, decide it is time for them to fall? From the windswept adobe ruins of the Moche temples, we now trace our path down the coastal desert plains of southern Peru, where the arid earth is bleached by the sun, and the air carries echoes of ancient civilizations. Among the barren rocks and scrubby shrubs lie thousands of polished, egg-shaped stones, each engraved with intricate scenes. These are the Ica Stones, artifacts at the heart of one of archaeology's most enduring controversies. Glistening in the midday glare, an Ica stone can look as ordinary as a river pebble until you turn it in your hand. One side may depict a detailed surgery, an open skull with surgical tools, sutures pulling flesh together. Another stone shows trilobites crawling across the sea floor. Yet another bears the unmistakable outline of a Tyrannosaurus rex in mid-roar. There are stones etched with constellations, maps of an unknown coast, and even scenes of people harnessing dinosaurs with ropes. The level of detail, from the scale patterns on the beasts to the rivets of an imagined helicopter, seems at once impossible and compelling. When these stones first began appearing in local markets during the 1960s, they were dismissed as tourist curiosities, novelty items carved for quick profit. But the sheer number, estimated in the tens of thousands, and the consistency of their style sparked a deeper intrigue. Who made them? When? And, most provocatively, what do they really show? The mainstream view. Most professional archaeologists consider the Ica stones a modern fabrication, a hoax perpetuated by local farmers and opportunists. In 1966, a local physician named Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquea assembled a large collection, displaying them in his personal museum in Ica. Cabrera, captivated by the idea of a lost prehistoric civilization, promoted them as evidence that advanced surgery and dinosaur hunting coexisted tens of millions of years ago. He published books, held conferences, and filmed documentaries, all centered on these stones. Skeptics emphasize the lack of any stratigraphic context or scientific excavation. No Ica stones have ever been found in secure geological layers. The stones appear in roadside markets, sold by farmers who claim to have found them randomly on their ranches, often in the same alluvial gravels where potatoes grow. In 1977, a farmer named Basilio Ushuya even demonstrated carving stones in front of the press, admitting that he and others had produced them in the recent past. Carbon dating of pigments occasionally applied to the carvings yielded modern dates, and the anatomical accuracy of the medical scenes, while superficially impressive, derives from 20th century surgical manuals, not ancient Peruvian knowledge. From this perspective, the Ica stones are a cautionary tale. How the desire for sensational discoveries can override basic scientific rigor. Without carbon-datable context, without corroborating artifacts, and with documented evidence of modern carving, the stones remain a colorful but untrustworthy chapter in pseudo-archaeology. The unexplained elements, yet the stones continue to captivate. Even if hoaxed, their sheer variety and the consistency of their artistic conventions raise questions. Why would so many individual farmers and craftspeople share such a uniform style across decades? Why do the stones so often depict medical procedures, trepanations, hip replacements, even open-heart surgery, when only a tiny fraction show dinosaurs or celestial charts? Some researchers argue that the stones may preserve a genuine local tradition of petroglyphic imagery, later commercialized and exaggerated. Early Spaniards recorded that pre-Inca peoples of the Ica Valley practiced skull surgery and mummification, rituals demanding anatomical knowledge. Could kernels of real tradition have morphed into fantastical imagery when outsiders paid for sensational designs? The lines between folklore, local lore, and opportunistic fabrication can be thin. Moreover, not all the stones bear outlandish scenes. Hundreds depict scenes of daily life: llamas grazing, fishermen hauling nets, women grinding maize. These simpler carvings align closely with known pre-Columbian iconography, mirroring ceramic and textile patterns from the Paracas and Nazca cultures. This suggests that the artisans who carved the stones had some familiarity with regional artistic motifs, not mere random hoaxers. Could it be that an authentic but now forgotten stone engraving tradition existed, later co-opted and embellished? Speculative and fringe theories. Beyond the mainstream debate, more speculative ideas have taken root in popular discourse. Some enthusiasts propose that the Ica stones record true memories of an advanced prehistoric civilization, perhaps one destroyed in a cataclysmic flood or comet strike. In this view, the stones are akin to petroglyphic time capsules, preserving the knowledge of ancestors who carved them onto basalt pebbles before disappearing from history. Others point to the scenes of flying machines and molecular diagrams, suggesting that the stones reflect contact with extraterrestrial visitors. The argument goes that such devices and chemical notations were beyond the scope of any known ancient society, and thus the stones must encode the memory of alien intervention. A third fringe hypothesis argues for a lost civilization of pre-Inca Peru, one whose people possessed sophisticated medical and astronomical knowledge, but whose cities were wiped out by shifting river courses or volcanic eruptions. The Ica Stones, in this narrative, are the survival of a hidden record, kept alive by descendants forced into the mountains. While these theories lack empirical support, they endure because the stones themselves remain enigmatic. Even Dr. Cabrera's museum, though criticized, preserved an archive of over 12,000 stones, each a unique tableau. That archive, held in a modest exhibit in Ica, continues to draw curious visitors who peer at the stones with equal parts wonder and skepticism. A story still unfolding. In recent years, a few independent researchers have attempted to apply more rigorous methods. Some geologists have examined the weathering patterns on the stones, seeking clues to age beyond the carving technique. Others have used 3D scanning to compare carving tool marks against traditional stoneworking implements. A handful of the most convincing medical scene stones have been cross-referenced with pre-1900 surgical textbooks, revealing both accurate and anachronistic details. Yet no definitive peer-reviewed study has settled the matter. The stones elude straightforward explanation because they sit at the intersection of archaeology, geology, anthropology, and human psychology. They reveal as much about our capacity for imagination and for hoax as they do about the past. The unanswered questions. Standing before a wall of Ica stones, one cannot help but feel a chill of possibility. If even a fraction of these carvings reflects genuine ancient tradition, if even one stone preserves a fragment of genuine pre-Hispanic knowledge, then our understanding of Andean history would need profound revision. Conversely, if they are all modern fabrications, they exemplify the allure of the mysterious and the ease with which desire for sensational evidence can override careful inquiry. What then do we trust? The stones themselves, the testimonies of local farmers, the demonstrations of hoax artisans, the absence of stratified context, or the tantalizing possibility that we stand unknowingly at the threshold of a hidden chapter in human history? The Ica Stones Controversy invites us to confront the limits of our methods, the power of narrative, and the enduring human urge to believe in the impossible. And so we leave their quiet desert home, with questions radiating outward like ripples in a pool. What if some stones are authentic and others are not? What if the truth lies not in wholesale acceptance or rejection, but in a nuanced middle ground yet to be explored? The desert winds shift the sands around Ica, burying stones and revealing them again. The controversy endures, not because it is easily solved, but because it speaks to something deeper. Our never-ending quest to uncover the unknown, to hear the whispers of the past, and to wonder who we are when faced with the impossible. What secrets might still be hidden beneath those engraved surfaces, waiting for the right question to unlock them? From the sun-baked plains of Ica, where engraved stones whisper of vanished worlds, our journey now descends into the earth, beneath the Mediterranean island of Malta, into a labyrinth carved by unknown hands more than 5,000 years ago. Here lies the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, a subterranean necropolis hewn from living rock, and within its shadowed depths, a chamber that speaks with uncanny resonance, the so-called sound chamber. Imagine stepping down a narrow shaft of ancient limestone, lit only by the beam of a torch. The air grows cool, damp, and heavy with millennia. You pass through vaulted galleries, each lined with smooth walls of ochre and red pigment, decorated with spirals and geometric motifs. The passage narrows until it opens into a circular room crowned by a low, tri-lobed ceiling, a space no larger than a modern living room. Yet, in that intimate chamber, sound behaves in a way that defies simple explanation. Scholars believe the Hypogeum was constructed around 3300 to 3000 BC by Malta's prehistoric temple builders, a culture already responsible for megalithic wonders above ground. But why carve so deeply into the bedrock? And why fashion this unique alcove, later dubbed the Oracle Room with its acoustic peculiarities. The mainstream discoveries. In the 1960s, archaeologists noticed something extraordinary. When a speaker emits a low-frequency tone inside the sound chamber, around 110–120 Hz, the space seems to come alive. The sound waves bounce off the curved ceiling and lobed niches, reinforcing certain frequencies and creating a vibratory hum that envelops the listener. Modern acoustic engineers, using spectrum analyzers and precise microphones, confirmed that the chamber amplifies these bass frequencies by as much as 20 decibels, producing standing waves that can be felt in the chest more than heard by the ears. Studies suggest this resonance is not mere chance. The chamber's dimensions, its roughly 4-meter diameter, 3-meter height, and carefully angled walls, appear fine-tuned to reinforce a specific frequency range. Some researchers propose that this frequency aligns with the human alpha brainwave band, associated with relaxation and meditative states. In laboratory tests, participants exposed to 110 Hz vibrations report sensations of calm, a sense of being drawn into the space, responses not seen in control environments. Archaeologists point out that the Hypogeum's builders were expert craftsmen. The above-ground temples on Malta display remarkable skill in quarrying and shaping stone. It stands to reason that they understood the basics of sound and could have designed the sound chamber for ritual or therapeutic purposes. The question is, what purpose? Rituals of the ancestors. Inside the Hypogeum, human remains were found in niches and chambers, tens of thousands of bones belonging to the island's prehistoric inhabitants. The Oracle Room, however, contains few burials. Its floor is clear, its walls unmarked by urns or grave goods. This suggests a special function, distinct from funerary interment. One prevailing theory holds that the chamber served as a rite of passage. Initiates, perhaps new shamans or priests, would enter alone, sound imbued by ceremonial drums or chants, inducing trance states through the chamber's resonance. In this liminal space between life and death, sound could have bridged worlds. Ethnomusicologists note parallels in other ancient cultures. The Australian didgeridoo produces low-frequency drone used in initiation ceremonies. Tibetan monks employ chanting and resonant chambers to alter consciousness. Could Malta's temple builders have tapped into the same universal language of vibration? Signs of healing or divination. Medical anthropologists have speculated that the Oracle Room might have functioned as an ancient healing sanctuary. Today, sound therapy employs low-frequency tones to reduce stress, manage pain, and even accelerate bone healing. While it may be anachronistic to project modern science onto Neolithic Malta, it is intriguing that the chamber's resonance corresponds to frequencies now explored in experimental medicine. Alternatively, the space could have been a place of prophecy. The distant mumble of a flute or the whispered intonation of incantations would echo and warp, giving the impression that voices came from beyond the stone itself. Such an effect would lend authority to the speaker and mystery to the messages, guiding communal decisions through a perceived dialogue with ancestors or deities. Speculative and fringe theories. Beyond these mainstream ideas lie more speculative interpretations. Some enthusiasts propose that the sound chamber encodes knowledge of physics beyond its era, proof that Neolithic engineers mastered acoustics to an astonishing degree. Others see the chamber as part of a global network of energy vortexes, places where Earth's natural frequencies peak, used by ancient peoples for alignment with cosmic forces. A handful of fringe voices even suggest that the resonance served as a means of communication with non-human intelligences, spirits, extraterrestrials, or elemental beings. They point to the uncanny effect of the chamber's hum as evidence that it was designed to tune in to unseen realms. While such theories lack empirical support, they underscore the profound sense of otherworldliness the space can evoke. Unanswered questions. Despite decades of research, many questions remain. Was the chamber's acoustic effect intentional, or a serendipitous byproduct of its shape? Did the Hypogeum builders test and refine the resonance, or did they simply recognize its power when they heard it? What instruments or voices originally filled the chamber? Can we ever know the precise rituals performed here, or the words whispered in its hush? And crucially, why build such an elaborate underground space, carved against the weight of the earth, hidden from the sky-worshipping gaze so common in Neolithic architecture? What compelled these ancient Maltese to plunge into darkness to create light of a different sort? A light of vibration, felt more than seen. As researchers continue to analyze 3D acoustic models to simulate ancient instruments and to compare the chamber with other Neolithic sites, the Hypogeum's true purpose remains just out of reach. The artifacts and bones tell part of the story, but the heart of the mystery pulses in the silence between echoes. An invitation to wonder. Standing in the center of the sound chamber, surrounded by cool stone, enveloped in the hum of resonance, one cannot help but feel small, connected to a lineage of humans who dared to shape sound itself. The walls, carved by hands that no longer exist, still remember each contour, each notch, each frequency judged just so. Perhaps the Hypogeum's enduring power lies not in definitive answers, but in the questions it provokes. The chamber challenges us to consider how ancient people experienced their world, not only with sight and story, but with vibration and collective pulse. It reminds us that sound, like memory, can linger long after the voices have fallen silent. And so, we leave the oracle room with its lingering hum echoing in our bones, carrying forward one question above all. What other secrets lie hidden in stone, carved in darkness and revealed only by the whisper of the past? As the echo of ancient voices fades from Malta's subterranean sound chamber, our journey surfaces once more, this time to the rolling hills and sun-drenched landscapes of central Italy. Here, between the emerald valleys of Tuscany and the blue waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea, lie the silent testaments of a people whose influence once shaped the early Mediterranean world, the Etruscans. Their richly painted tombs, grand city walls, and elegant bronze mirrors speak of a civilization both sophisticated and enigmatic, and of a disappearance that still puzzles scholars. Imagine standing before the tumulus at Cerveteri, a mound of earth crowned by ancient stone, its entrance hewn into living rock. Beyond the threshold, corridors branch into chambers lined with rows of carved sarcophagi and frescoed walls depicting feasting couples, winged deities, and the gentle curve of amphorae. The air is cool, scented faintly by damp stone and centuries of incense. Here, the Etruscans celebrated life and death in equal measure, believing in an afterlife where banquets continued and music played on. By the 7th century BC, the Etruscans controlled a network of city-states, Veii, Tarquinia, Volterra, linked by roads carved from limestone and stone bridges spanning swift rivers. Their artisans mastered bronze working and crafted delicate jewelry. Their priests read omens in the flight of birds and the entrails of sacrificed animals. Their merchants traded wine, olive oil, and pottery as far afield as Greece and North Africa. The Etruscan language, written in an alphabet derived from the Greeks, adorned tombs, temples, and public monuments. And yet, by the 1st century BC, these proud city-states had all but vanished. Their language fell silent, wiped from public life, surviving only in scattered inscriptions on funerary urns. Their art and religion were absorbed, sometimes celebrated, sometimes suppressed, by the rising power of Rome. Within a few generations, no one remembered the Etruscan name for their lands, their deities, or themselves. The mainstream narrative. Historians generally agree on a gradual process of assimilation. Beginning in the late 6th century BC, Rome extended its influence northward, conquering Veii in 396 BC after a long siege. Other Etruscan cities fell or became client states. By the 4th century BC, Roman colonists and veterans settled in former Etruscan territories, altering demographics and land ownership. The Etruscan aristocracy intermarried with Roman elites, adopting Roman customs and Latin speech for political advantage. Economically, Rome's expansion brought new trade routes and agricultural practices. Etruscan markets, once vibrant with foreign goods, were eclipsed by the larger Roman economy. Culturally, Roman religion co-opted Etruscan deities. Tenea became Jupiter, Uni became Juno, and Etruscan rituals were woven into the Roman state cult. Over time, Etruscan language inscriptions faded. Parents spoke Latin to their children. Tomb inscriptions increasingly featured Latin epitaphs. By 50 BC, Etruscan had ceased to be a living language. Yet in this narrative, some questions persist. If the Etruscan cities were conquered piecemeal over centuries, why did their language survive so long? Inscriptions appear as late as the 1st century BC. And why do we find evidence of deliberate destruction? Temples dismantled stone by stone, inscriptions chiseled away, rather than peaceful cultural blending in certain locales. Archaeological clues and open mysteries. In 1891, a remarkable cache of Etruscan texts was discovered at Pyrgi, gold tablets inscribed in both Etruscan and Phoenician. These rare bilingual inscriptions offered glimpses of Etruscan political alliances and religious dedications around 500 BC. Yet beyond funerary epitaphs and temple offerings, no Etruscan literary works survive. If the Etruscans composed histories, myths, or poetry, they have vanished without trace. Archaeologists also point to sudden population shifts. Cemetery assemblies show abrupt changes in burial customs around the 2nd century BC. Some necropolises that once held hundreds of family tombs were abandoned, only to be reused sporadically in Roman times. Did epidemics, perhaps introduced by contact with distant armies, decimate Etruscan families? Or did economic collapse force rural communities to migrate toward Roman centers? Even more puzzling is the disappearance of urban centers. Veii's magnificent Acropolis was quarried for building stone to expand Rome. Its temples torn down, its streets built over. Yet in other regions, northern Etruria, the Po Valley, Etruscan settlements continued under Roman names, their layouts preserved in modern towns. Why was this pattern uneven? What determined whether an Etruscan city was obliterated or reincorporated? Speculative perspectives. Beyond these mainstream explanations, more speculative ideas have emerged. A few scholars have suggested that religious persecution played a role. As Rome solidified its identity, it suppressed foreign cults, including the Etruscan haruspicy, divination by entrails, and flamines, specialist priests. Could the eradication of sacred rites have undermined civic cohesion, leaving communities adrift without their spiritual framework? Others have proposed environmental factors. In the early 1st millennium BC, deforestation for iron smelting and agriculture may have led to soil erosion and decreased crop yields. With declining harvests, Etruscan elites might have lost power, and commoners may have migrated elsewhere, toward Rome's expanding grain economies or out to colonial frontiers. A handful of fringe theories go further, positing mass migrations or even secret exiles. Some 19th century historians speculated that Etruscan nobles fled to Greece or Anatolia, preserving their culture in hidden enclaves, an idea reinforced by classical legends that linked Etruscans to refugees from Troy. Modern genetic studies, however, find no clear Etruscan genetic signature in Eastern Mediterranean populations, suggesting such migrations, if they occurred, were small or diluted over time. The lingering enigma. Despite centuries of scholarship, the vanishing of the Etruscans retains an aura of mystery. They were neither abruptly wiped out by conquest nor entirely swallowed by Rome's growth. Instead, they seemed to dissolve. A civilization of vibrant art, complex religion, and powerful city-states that quietly blended into a larger Roman tapestry. What remains undeniable is the Etruscan legacy in Roman culture. The toga and fasces, the triumphal procession, the practice of gladiatorial games. Latins borrowed Etruscan architectural techniques, arch construction, hydraulic engineering, and artistic motifs. Yet while Roman writers praised Etruscan augurs and craftsmen, they seldom attributed these innovations to an identifiable homeland. Today, we excavate tombs brimming with frescoes of banquets, chariots, and winged sphinxes. We study bronze mirrors inscribed with poetic verses. We decipher Etruscan names, Velthur, Laris, Tanaquil, that hint at a culture of nuance and ceremony. And still, the voice of the Etruscans remains faint. An invitation to wonder. Perhaps the greatest wonder is not that the Etruscan city-states fell, but that they were remembered at all, etched into Rome's foundations, whispered in classical texts, preserved in the painted chambers of Cerveteri and Tarquinia. Their disappearance was not total, but transformative, a civilization absorbed and reshaped into the bedrock of an empire. Yet questions remain. How did Etruscan identity persist in pockets even after centuries of Roman rule? Might undiscovered inscriptions linger in private collections or lie hidden beneath modern streets? And what did the last generations of Etruscans feel as their language faded and their rulers' names became footnotes in foreign histories? The hills of Tuscany hold their silence. The sun sets on the ancient tumuli, and in the cool twilight, we sense that the Etruscans still speak to us, not in a language we can utter, but in stone and pigment, in ritual echoes and architectural forms. Their final farewell may have been soft, but their presence endures, inviting us, archaeologists and dreamers alike, to listen closely and to wonder what else remains hidden beneath the earth, waiting for rediscovery. From the sunlit hills of Etruria, where silent tumuli hold the secrets of a vanished civilization, our journey now sweeps down across continents and oceans into the misty highlands of northern Laos. Here, in the shadow of the Annamite Range, lies a landscape at once serene and uncanny, the Plain of Jars. Imagine dawn mist clinging to low-lying limestone outcrops. The air is cool, scented with damp earth and the tang of nearby rivers. Across a gently rolling plateau, enormous stone vessels emerge from the grass, hundreds of them, scattered like ancient sentinels. Some lie upright, their broad rims cutting silhouettes against pale sky. Others topple on their sides, broken pieces half buried in reddish soil. Each jar is carved from a single block of sandstone or granite, standing 1 to 3 meters high, with diameters often exceeding 2 meters and weighing up to 6 tons. Yet they are neither tombs nor temple fragments. They are jars, mysterious containers whose purpose has eluded definitive explanation for centuries. The discovery and early investigations. First recorded by French explorers in the 19th century, the Plain of Jars drew the attention of colonial archaeologists who surveyed the region in the early 1900s. They noted 3 primary jar sites, designated Sites 1, 2, and 3, each containing dozens of megalithic pots arranged in loose clusters. Later surveys would identify over 90 sites across a 70-kilometer area, revealing jars in valleys, on hilltops, and even in stream beds. It was clear these were not natural formations. The jars bore tool marks, chisel scars, and smoothing lines, and some featured decorative bands or lip moldings. The local Khmu and Lao people, living amid these relics for generations, held their own oral traditions. Some believed the jars were used to brew vast quantities of rice wine for funerary feasts. Others spoke of giant beings or dragon deities who once used them as water receptacles. Yet, without written records or inscriptions, the jars seemed to guard their secrets closely. Mainstream explanations. Archaeologists today generally agree on a funerary context. Excavations around several jars have unearthed human remains, burials placed in limestone sarcophagi or simple pits, sometimes accompanied by grave goods, bronze bracelets, agate beads, and coarse pottery shards. Radiocarbon dates from skeletal collagen and associated charcoal samples suggest the jars were used between 500 BC and 500 AD during the Iron Age and early historic period. In this view, the jars served as mortuary urns, either to process the dead through exposure, a form of excarnation, or to store cremated remains. The association between jars and burials echoes practices in Southeast Asia and beyond. Urn burials are documented in southern China and Vietnam from similar periods. Perhaps the jars once held human flesh or bones before final interment, or served as platforms for funerary rites above the ground. Yet this interpretation leaves room for questions. If funerary, why are so many jars empty? Why do burial pits cluster at some sites but not others? And why are jars found several kilometers from known settlements, in areas now covered by dense forest or rice paddies? The logistics of creation. Another mystery lies in the jar's manufacture and placement. Many jars are carved from local sandstone, others from granite quarried more than 10 kilometers away. Transporting multi-ton blocks across rugged terrain, without wheels or draft animals, would have required remarkable ingenuity: log rollers, sledges, rope, and coordinated labor. Why invest such effort in funerary containers? And once carved, how were the jars erected so evenly on the ground, often balanced on ring bases or pedestals? Tool marks reveal the use of iron chisels, but the exact methods of carving, was the jar bored from the top down or carved in two halves and rejoined, remains speculative. Precise surveying techniques seem absent. Jars cluster loosely, not in perfect rows. Yet the sheer scale and uniformity of jar shapes across dozens of sites suggest a shared cultural tradition, even if local craftsmen adapted styles to available stone. Cultural context and decline. The period of jar use corresponds to shifting political and cultural landscapes. The plain of jars lies near trade routes linking the Yangtze Valley, northern Thailand, and the Mekong River Basin. Iron tools, bronze ornaments, and glass beads found in burial contexts attest to far-reaching connections. The jar's decline around 500 AD may reflect changing burial customs, the rise of new polities, such as the early Lansang kingdom, and the adoption of Buddhism, which discouraged elaborate funerary rites. Over centuries, the jars were left to weather storms, moss, and war. During the Indochina conflicts of the 20th century, the plain of jars became a contested zone. Unexploded ordnance still haunts the region, limiting excavation and tourism. As a result, large swaths remain unstudied, and many jars lie hidden beneath soil and vegetation. Speculative and fringe theories. Beyond funerary use, the jars have inspired more speculative ideas. The local legend of rice wine brewing has been taken literally by some enthusiasts who imagine communal feasts, jars filled with fermenting rice alcohol, drunk in massive ceremonies. But the jars' narrow mouths and lack of spouts make them far from practical fermentation vats. Others propose astronomical or ritual calendars. Some jars align with solstices when viewed from key hilltop sites, suggesting they marked seasonal cycles, directing agricultural activities or ritual gatherings. Yet alignments are inconsistent, and jars appear randomly oriented in many locales. In the most imaginative interpretations, the jars are linked to giants or deities. Stories tell of supernatural potters tasked by mountain gods to craft reservoirs, or of jars used to trap malevolent spirits released during funerary rites. A few fringe writers have even likened the jars to extraterrestrial storage tanks left behind by visiting civilizations, an idea unsupported by any material evidence. Continuing mysteries. Despite decades of study, the Plain of Jars remains in many ways silent. Excavations have cleared burial pits at fewer than a dozen sites. Most jars stand undisturbed. The majority hold no associated burial evidence, leaving open the question of their primary function. Conservation efforts, complicated by unexploded ordnance, have mapped only a fraction of the total site number. Remote sensing, LiDAR surveys, and limited test trenches hint at additional jar fields hidden beneath scrub and saplings. We still do not know the names of the people who carved these stones, nor their words for death, burial, or the afterlife. The jars themselves bear no markings, no inscriptions, no maker's marks, no dates. They stand mute, their massive forms a testament to human will and mystery. An invitation to reflect. Walking among the jars at dusk, one is struck by their quiet dignity. The wind sighs through their rims. A single jar, half buried at the forest's edge, gleams like an ancient eye. For centuries, these vessels have witnessed nightfall, monsoon rains, the passage of buffalo herds, and the upheaval of wars. Yet they endure, testaments to a civilization's rituals, to the craftsmanship of anonymous hands, to the human desire to honor the dead. And so we leave the Plain of Jars with questions that echo across the plateau. Were these megaliths primarily funerary, or did they serve multiple purposes, ceremonial, practical, celestial? What lies beneath the unexcavated jar fields, waiting for archaeologists to return? And most hauntingly, what truths have been lost as villages rose and fell, as rice paddies faded to jungle, as war scattered the living and the dead? The jars themselves do not answer. They remain vigilant, their bulk unshaken, their purpose half glimpsed beneath layers of soil and story. In their silence, they invite us to ponder the limits of our knowledge and to wonder what mysteries still lie hidden in the earth, awaiting the curious, the careful, and the patient. From the mist-shrouded plains of northern Laos, where ancient jars once held the secrets of life and death, our journey now turns westward, over the peaks of the Andes Mountains, to the windswept highlands of western Bolivia. Here, beneath the snow-capped summit of Mount Sajama, the country's highest peak, rise enigmatic stone spires that pierce the thin air. The Sajama Towers. Imagine dawn breaking over a landscape of rolling grasslands and scattered boulders, where vicuñas graze in silent herds and the horizon shimmers in pink light. Amid this austere beauty stand the towers, cylindrical stone structures, some reaching 10 meters in height, their dry-laid masonry gleaming in the first rays of sun. Each is built of carefully stacked slabs of volcanic rock, tapering slightly toward the top, and often crowned with a capstone balanced precariously on the summit. From a distance, they resemble watchful sentinels, guardians of the Puna, standing defiantly against wind and time. These towers cluster on the slopes and foothills around Sajama volcano, dotting the landscape in seemingly random patterns. Some stand alone, others form loose alignments along ridges or beside ancient pathways. Their presence has puzzled travelers and scholars for centuries. What are they? Why were they built? And by whom? The mainstream view. Archaeologists generally agree that the Sajama Towers, also called chulpas by local Aymara communities, date to the late Intermediate period and early Inca era, circa 1000 to 1450 AD. In this view, they served as funerary monuments for high-status individuals or family lineages. Inside many towers have been found human remains, wrapped in textiles, sometimes accompanied by ceramic offerings or metal ornaments. The structures thus functioned as above-ground tombs, elevating the dead closer to the sun and the heavens. The tower's cylindrical form and mortarless construction showcase the engineering skill of their builders. Stones were quarried from nearby outcrops, shaped to fit snugly, and stacked without binding agents, an assemblage both sturdy and flexible, able to withstand frost heave and seismic jolts. Placement near water sources and grazing lands suggests a link between ancestral commemoration and pastoral livelihoods. In agrarian societies where livestock herds defined wealth and survival, honoring forebears with prominent monuments reinforced land rights and communal identity. Yet even this mainstream interpretation leaves nuances unexplained. Why do some towers stand solitary at high elevations, far from any settlement? Why are a few towers exceptionally large, over 10 meters tall, when most remain slender and under 6 meters? And why do decorative elements appear on some towers, often in the form of protruding stones arranged as crosses or geometric patterns, while others are plain, unadorned cylinders? Architectural variations and social signals. A closer look at the towers reveals subtle variations. Some feature double-walled cores, accessible through narrow entryways. Others have only solid facades. Certain towers contain internal niches or ledges, possibly for offerings or platform burials. A handful bear carved stone rings around their midsections, reminiscent of necklaces or belts. These distinctions may reflect social status, clan affiliations, or chronological phases of construction, yet the criteria remain unclear. Ethnohistoric accounts recorded by Spanish chroniclers in the 16th century mention ancestor worship among Andean highland communities, with tombs and offerings central to ritual life. The Sajama Towers, in this context, function as focal points for cheras, annual festivals where herders and farmers gathered to celebrate livestock fertility, harvest cycles, and ancestral blessings. Offerings of coca leaves, grains, and chicha, fermented maize, were placed at the tower's base. Over time, such rites may have solidified the tower's roles as both funerary markers and communal shrines. However, the tower's remote positions, some more than 5,000 meters above sea level, pose practical questions. Would relatives have carried heavy offerings to such heights year after year? Or did the most isolated towers serve a different purpose, perhaps as markers along transhumance routes, guiding herders between summer and winter pastures? Possible astronomical alignments. Intriguingly, alignments between certain towers and prominent landscape features have led researchers to propose an astronomical dimension. From select vantage points, the sun appears to rise or set directly above tower summits on solstice days. Similarly, alignments with bright stars in the southern sky may have marked seasonal shifts. If intentional, such orientations would integrate funerary architecture with celestial observation, melding ancestral veneration with agricultural calendaring. Yet establishing clear and consistent alignments is challenging. Towers were built over centuries in loosely defined clusters, and some have collapsed or been dismantled. Moreover, shifting over time due to erosion and seismic activity may have altered the original positions. While the idea remains tantalizing, conclusive evidence for a systematic astronomical plan has yet to emerge. Speculative theories. Beyond these archaeological and ethnographic frameworks, more speculative ideas have arisen. A few propose that the Sajama Towers are not tombs at all, but watchtowers, built to monitor grazing routes, signal distant communities, or guard mineral resources such as obsidian. The elevated locations would offer strategic vantage points, and the tower's solid construction could double as refuge in times of conflict. Others envision the towers as markers of subterranean springs or hidden water systems, an encoding of critical environmental knowledge in stone. In the high Andes, water is life. A map of water sources carved into the landscape would be invaluable. Yet the towers are not arranged in any obvious hydrographic pattern. Their correlation with water remains uncertain. More fringe theories delve into mystical territory, asserting that the towers channel earth energies or serve as ancient power centers. Authors of such theories draw parallels to ley lines and suggest that the towers were nodes in a network amplifying spiritual currents. While these ideas lack empirical support, they reflect the emotional impact the towers can have. Standing before them, one feels a quiet intensity, as if the stones themselves resonate with unspoken forces. Continuing mysteries. Decades of fieldwork by Bolivian and international archaeologists have cataloged hundreds of towers and conducted limited excavations. Yet much of the Sajama region remains unexplored, in part due to its remoteness and the ever-present risk of altitude sickness. Unexploded ordnance left over from 20th century conflicts also restricts access to certain areas. A handful of recent studies have utilized drone-based photogrammetry and LiDAR scanning to map tower clusters in high resolution. These technologies promise to reveal site boundaries, spatial relationships, and undiscovered structures. Radiocarbon dating of organic remains within tower burials continues to refine the chronology, suggesting construction phases spanning from 1000 to 1450 AD. But the towers themselves offer no inscriptions. No carved glyphs declare lineage or tell epic tales. Their only script is stone, stacked, balanced, enduring. And because they predate the Spanish conquest, no written records by their builders survive. The tower's voices remain unmediated by language. An invitation to reflect. As evening falls over the Sajama plains, the sky deepens to indigo, and the tower's silhouettes darken against the stars. A single herder's llama bell echoes in the distance. In this moment, the towers seem less like isolated tombs and more like a constellation of stone, each spire a point of memory, each shadow a fragment of story. We leave the Sajama Towers knowing only what we can see, pillars of basalt stacked by unseen hands, reaching skyward in thanksgiving or defiance. We know their broad purpose as funerary monuments, yet the full ritual tapestry of their builders remains elusive. We glimpse the possibility of astronomical design, yet lack the proof to confirm it. We hear whispers of watchtowers and water maps, yet find only graves and offerings. And so we carry with us the unanswered questions. Why build such lofty tombs on these exposed slopes? What ceremonies once filled their shadows? How did the communities who erected them perceive life, death, and the world beyond the mountains? In the calm hush of high-altitude twilight, the towers do not speak in words, but they do speak in presence. They invite us to stand quietly, to let the wind tell its stories, and to wonder what ancient lives remain etched, immovable, in stone. What else might lie hidden among the boulders and grasses, waiting, patient, for the next traveler to listen?